Honorable members, at the break, we were debating the law revision bill. I presume we are now ready. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of the Pinewood constituency who sent me to this place and whose support I am forever grateful. Madam Speaker, before I get into my brief contribution, I would like to thank those who participated in our annual Easter egg hunt on Saturday. A good time was had by all, in particular the young kids. Madam Speaker, on a second point, on Saturday, I had breakfast at my spot out east, and I had the good company of three gentlemen: Doyle Burrows, Arthur Gibson of AG Electric, and also former police officer Blakey Wright, who's probably well known to on both sides, but in particular on the other side. And we had a good conversation, and the conversation turned into the law, the prosecution, and how things were back in the day, and how things are now in terms of moving cases, in particular criminal cases. And while we're talking about Doyle Burrows, Madam Speaker, I would like to employ my good colleague from Fort Charlotte, who speaks on his behalf. There is two people I could say, those of us who live in the East and who walk Prince Charles, walk around Yamacraw, come up Sassoon Hill, who know of the contributions of members of that community who go beyond in terms of beautifying that area, especially the beach area. One is Doyle Burrows, who spends his own money and take pride. Sometimes you see him before day clean, he's walking in the beach and picking up litter. There's another lady, I don't know her name, but you would also see her walking Prince Charles, and she's got her stick and picking up garbage from off the roads and also feeding the animals. And this is a perfect example of the country that we have, where people give of themselves, not asking for anything in return. But since we are rewarding them, maybe we may consider something in terms of remuneration for Mr. Burrows, whose work is really, and those of us who live in the East, we have an appreciation for the work that he does.
Saved my life.
Yes. His only sin is that he's a valley boy, but I'm prepared to overlook that. but a great behemoth. And I will get the name of the lady because I see her often, but yet I've never asked her name, but I would always say, thanks. And to Blakey Wright again, I say thank you for your service to this country as a police officer. Madam Speaker, I rise to give my contribution with regards to this, and there was, early on today, there was back and forth with regards to whether this is important legislation, or I don't know if I used the right word, but as was stated, Madam Speaker, every time there is amendments or repeal, it must be important because the government of the day would have put that on their agenda. And while the member from East Grand Bahama made the point of overhyping, that's a fair position depending on who's listening to it. Mm-hmm. We on this side believe that it was important that we are bringing it in this. And those who saying that we support it, but we don't think it's that, I think it's fair. But I don't want us to trivialize these things. Madam Speaker, I've been fortunate to be an attorney, and I'm sure the attorneys in here in this parliament, my learned senior here, understand that It's a grouping of which politics do not play a part. And I remember my becoming an attorney, two men that I look forward to in getting their advice was a part of my lunch bunch grouping. And that's the late Sir Arlington Butler and J. Henry Boswick Casey, who I heard was hospitalized and is not in the best of health. And I just would like to send my prayers with regards to Henry to Dame Janet Boswick, and hope for a speedy and full recovery. But this Parliament, Madam Speaker, if you go through the history, there have always been in this place leaders from the community who were legislators, who were actually good lawyers. We could go back, A.F. Adley, Godfrey Kelly, Jeffrey Johnstone. We move into the generation of Sir Orville Turnquest, Paul Adley, great legal minds. And sometimes I think we take for granted the contributions of lawyers to a society as ours. There's always this position that, we have too much lawyers in the country, but until you are in a position where you need them, then we realize how important that they are, not that doctors or nurses and others are not. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because notwithstanding the talent that we've had in this place, it has taken us 50 years to get to this place, of which the law itself, just as other segments of our society is daily evolving, the law must too. And Madam Speaker, for a long time, those who practice in the legal profession have asked for redress to some of the vexing problems that are plagued. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to address some of those problems. I believe this new act, which repeals and replaces the Law Reform and Revision Act, will be a blessing for those of us who practice. Hopefully, Madam Speaker, I can have an extended time here, and I would like to make my contribution to the law from this place for the time being, and hopefully extended. Madam Speaker, in the modern world, and I consider the Bahamas a modern country, we have our set of problems and challenges as all, but we excel in athletics. Madam Speaker, there was a time ago when you had heart issues, you had to go to the States. Now, between Dr. Conville Brown or Dr. Dwayne Sands, we are comfortable in sons of the soil who provide that service for us. We hear of engineers who came out of this country, prestigious engineers, teachers, Rhodes Scholars. You look at Myron Roll, who's a neurosurgeon apart from being a football player. And so at some point, we have to stop looking at ourselves, as some do, as just developing. I think we punch way above our weight. And I think that Bahamians, and when we say it, stop qualifying the best little country. I have been to school in the US, I've been to school in the UK, and I've never ever wanted to live anyplace else but this little place that I call home. And I think that while we have far to go, I always go back to my friend from Marco City. When we went into SC or we went into AF, those schools were for those who couldn't get in the premier schools. So those AF students were the ones who couldn't get into government high at the time. But yet our school, in the same class, would have 2 sitting members and hold on, I'm quite deliberate, and one who came 10 years after us. So, Madam Speaker, those of our generation, back then, we saw this place as a different place where only those of a particular ilk, even those who went to public school. But in 2021, this parliament, you have 3 students from one school. One time it was just Government High and St. Augustine's. You know, SAC people will let you know there's only 2 people, those who went there and the rest of us. But I think the last parliament, Aaron Bailey had about 7 people in it. And so that's how far we have come as a country. And that compared to the quaint little settlement that I grew up in, where I lived with my grandmother, grandfather, and my great-grandmother, who was born in 1884 and couldn't conceptualize the world being that big for her to have a passport, and to have her great-grandson, who went to Morristown, started his education at Morristown Primary, that sit in the parliament today. And my 2 grandmothers, both of them, my maternal grandmother, Miriam Adley, was a maid, trained at the Dundas. My other grandmother, Ethel LaRoda named Moss, was a subsistence farmer. And so let's look at it in the space of 50 years where we are as a country, and we need to be proud of that fact. And as we evolve as a country, we must now make sure that those generations who come after us, evolve with it. And as we look at the law, now, one time ago, you walk in with your books. We all know now that you have to stay. You could have every book in the world on the internet, and depending on your talent, you are able to pick up. But as it relates to this piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, even the law online is not updated. And so, unless you have, and I'm sure my learned, my colleague here from Fort Charlotte, we have all experienced being on one side or the other, turning up to court and presenting a case where the law would have changed. And so, as we move forward, it is my hope and my prayer that the law evolve into that creature where it becomes the norm. When we look at legislation, we have every confidence that that legislation is up to date. Madam Speaker, as we legislate to govern a modern society, we have to revise our laws to meet the changing times. And we have to reform our laws to keep in step with the ever-reforming society. As we will sometimes have to consolidate 2 or more statutes to ensure that the laws governing and regulating one aspect of our society is codified into one statute. Madam Speaker, maintaining our laws requires dedication and commitment. It's not a job that could be done by any one person. Such an undertaking requires institutional dedication. This need has long been recognized, and this is why the Law Reform and Revision Commission was created in the first place. Madam Speaker, it was raised early on in the reduction of commissioners from 5 to 3 members, but that was stated by the member for Centerville. They may be the commissioners, but those commissioners, as a result of this repeal, would now be able to hire other technical people to make their job a lot easier. So the commissioners, without a support system for them, is basically useless, because you have 5 bodies in place with no support. Those commissioners would need a support system of drafters and other professionals to make their job more efficient. Because even if those individuals, 7 draftsmen. And so that's an increase. And that is across the spectrum, whether it be civil, whether it be criminal. So what is happening is not just on the 3 faces that you may see, but there's a whole plethora of individuals behind them to do the work that, and those individuals may not be getting credit. Maybe, and we all know that sometimes people get credit based on the hard work of others. And in this case, it's no different, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we cannot exaggerate the importance of the maintenance of the written law. Our laws are the thread that holds our society together. Our society is governed and regulated by our laws, and the administration of justice is made better when our laws are properly and efficiently maintained. And the governing of our society is made easier, Madam Speaker, when our citizens know and understand the laws by which they are governed. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, the lawyer is expected to know more than the layman, but every citizen should have a working understanding of our laws. One of the benefits of the work of the Commission is intended to make knowledge of the law more accessible. Madam Speaker, this proposed piece of legislation is badly needed. This is because this has been the case for a long time, but I'm happy that the government is dealing with this situation now. There is an adage, Madam Speaker, that says, justice must not only be done, justice must be seen to be done. And it is vital to our existence as a functioning society that our citizens believe in our justice system. But, Madam Speaker, to encourage and enhance that confidence, this is why I advocate for a better understanding of our laws. This will in turn create a greater appreciation of our laws and how they impact the lives of every Bahamian. But Madam Speaker, there is a perception that there are two sets of laws. And we need to dispel that myth, Madam Speaker. This simply will not do that there is a perception in the country that information or access to the law is only at the hands of those who practice. But an everyday citizen who may not be well-versed, because those of us who practice the law know that the first rule of interpretation is what? Take a word in its literal meaning. And there are members who may not be trained legally who can go to a site and just read as it says in its literal sense, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, every so often a new set of statute laws of the Bahamas are published. It is my view that most law firms have a set. These are invaluable when a lawyer is preparing for his case. But in a lot of cases, Madam Speaker, since the printing of those same books, the laws would have changed. Every time the Parliament meets and passes bills to either amend or create new laws. This bill is very important to the maintenance of the published statute laws of the Bahamas. From this alone, we can see that the work of the Commission is vitally important. The sheer volume of laws governing the Bahamas is growing all the time, and it is a tremendous amount of work to keep up with all of it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what is interesting, many of our laws are no longer effective in properly regulating our society. They are archaic, and they were written for a different Bahamas. As I said earlier, our society is ever evolving, and our laws must keep up with the changing needs of our society. Madam Speaker, the act that this bill is seeking to repeal and replace was brought into effect some 50 years ago. This is one of the many reasons why our laws have no response to the issues confronting the Bahamian society today. Here is a true picture and a real state of affairs, Madam Speaker. We all know, as I would have said earlier, we have situations where lawyers come into town with their books or even computers. And they may be outfoxed by that simple lawyer who's coming in with the updated laws. And what is the form of these updated laws? Usually in loose pieces of paper, because they are not in chronological order, as the changes would have been reflected. And so you just don't look to the act, you have to look to see if it was amended or what was repealed, Madam Speaker. And so the lawyer may think he have had a good case, and as we say, one word, shall or may, make a big difference in the interpretation, Madam Speaker. And a substantial amount of our laws are scattered around on loose pieces of paper because of the lack of dependable revision process. This bill is seeking to structure the process in order to bring efficiency to it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for many years this matter had not been properly addressed. As we know, other governments would have had other priorities, and hence it falls at our feet today, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in closing, I would just like to commend the government for bringing this important piece of legislation, notwithstanding some who may believe that it is not all that. Madam Speaker, I am not a part of that group. I understand the politics of it, but as we build on others, and I think what we need to do as parliamentarians, there are things that both sides could point to suggest that what is being done today was laid by someone else. And I'll be the first to admit that we on this side, we don't believe that we have a monopoly on love for the country or even its governing. Now, we make it our business of letting the government, the public know what we are doing. For those who try not to speak of their accomplishments, that's on them. But if we decide that we are going to let the public know what we are doing, of which we have a proud history of doing, I don't think we should be held accountable or in fault for that, Madam Speaker. With that, I commend the government and I support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Pleasant good afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker and parliamentary colleagues, and all those watching from across the length and breadth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, my apologies, welcome back. Special greeting also goes to the great people of Central Grand Bahama, who I am eternally grateful and proud to represent in this honored house. I want to send a shout out to my wife Heather, and daughters Jasmine and Imari, to my community of Waterkey, and to my family living across the length and breadth of the United States, especially South Carolina and Tampa and Fort Lauderdale. I'm always proud to advise this honorable house that the Central Grand Bahama Farmers Market remains strong, and backyard farming in Grand Bahama has become an initiative near and dear to our hearts. Congratulations to the board that organizes the world-famous Central Grand Bahama Farmers Market Festival that was such a hit again just this past weekend. Madam Speaker, the market has grown by leaps and bounds over the past few years, and vendors' numbers are climbing. We are continuing to invite the entire Bahamas to join these efforts to get into farming, grow more, and help to limit our reliance on the importation of 90% of what we consume. I want to offer special thanks to the member from Marco City for coming out this weekend and supporting and inspiring the vendors, and of course buying a lot of treats for the children. So I believe those parents had a lot of movement on Saturday night, considering all those children were on sugar high, I should say. I want to say a special thank you to the Special Projects Committee, headed by Ms. Faye Williams, for a top-class job done by organizing and hosting of the first annual Easter egg extravaganza. And it was held at the same time and place at the world famous farmers market. So we had it all in one place, bigger crowd. And a great time was had by all in attendance, including the parents, and most importantly, our little darlings. Madam Speaker, Salami Tatur, I noticed Mr. Carlos Reed, I wanted to congratulate him on the success of his grandson and the wonderful job that he did at the Carifta Games. And that caused me to segue into a statement mentioned by the member for Fort Charlotte, when he mentioned a great engineer, Dr. Norris Stubbs. I know him from another arena, from the world of track and field, because Dr. Norris Stubbs, along with the great Tommy Robinson, Dr. B.J. Nottish, and Kevin Johnson, held that unbreakable record for 25 years. So he's known as a fine sprinter. And that record was set at the Olympic Games in Mexico. And some 25 years later, the record was shattered by one Renwood Wells, Andrew Tynes, Bernard Young, and a little fella from Waterkey named Hiram Lewis. That was called the Unbreakable Record, but we got it done. I want to say happy birthday greetings to my sister Sarah, also today, and she shares her birthday with our National Deputy Chair, Heather Hunt. So I'm hoping that they will all enjoy this day to the fullest. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to matters, Madam Speaker, that concerns the residents of Central Grand Bahama and Grand Bahama as a whole. And just allow me a bit to speak to some infrastructural concerns that I have in Grand Bahama. As we are rapidly approaching the hurricane season, the city of Freeport, they're hosting a hurricane preparedness training seminar for this upcoming weekend in preparation for the season. In preparation for last year's hurricane season, Central Grand Bahama, also in partnership with the Church of Scientology and the Township of Prentice Point, we held a similar course, and we used the same NGOs, and we certified some 40 individuals in CPR and hurricane preparedness. So again, I was made to understand that this weekend they'll be allowed or be able to take a refresher course, because of course it is extremely important that we prepare ourselves, because every time hurricane season, we almost like that song that Madonna sing, like a touch for the very first time. Go through it for the first time over and over, as if it never happened before.
You missed something though.
Yes, sir. I'll allow you to say the word when you make your presentation. Madam Speaker, the Fishing Hole Road is a concern. And I said it earlier, and I'm saying it again. The culverts at the Fishing Hole Road need to be installed to mitigate against flooding of that road and the Queens Cove area. Once the upper causeway is completed, I believe we should move post-haste to get those recommended culverts in. And I'm going to keep hammering that point home. We need to get those culverts in. I just want to remind the Minister of Works, understand that there are two major concerns, Minister. I raised it with you before, with the seawall at Smith's Point. Two major concerns. At the western area, and I know this is East Grand Bahama area, but at the time I was the parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Works, I was proud to oversee those projects. On the western end of that seawall, or that defense wall, there are numerous large casuarina trees growing. And they're growing in abundance. Not only will they contribute to beach erosion and overgrown foliage in short order, but the root system, they have a very strong root system that can destabilize that defense wall. That wall was in place during the devastating Hurricane Dorian, and it protected the community of Smiths Point. So again, that very important wall, I believe that we need to get in there, Minister, as soon as possible, and have those casuarina trees removed. The other concern is the top railing at the top of the wall. It looks good from the roadside, nice and smooth. You see the nice gray paint on it. But I made it my business to look over. And on the seaside, the railing is corroding, showing sign of rust. So if the team hasn't done so already, they need to assess that, go there, brush it down, and paint it, to ensure that the life cycle of that rail and the wall is extended. So those two things, very important, Minister. Take the trees down, as well as protect and fix, repair the wall. Now, Madam Speaker, I'll get into some things that may not be too comfortable for all, but I have to say it anyway. And that is that I really question the priority of this New Day government. And I'll say why. April was declared as Child Protection Month. But the question is, what have we really done in this place during the month of April to move the needle, in favor of child protection in this house? What have we done in here? What did we discuss that speaks to April being Child Protection Month? I don't even remember us even giving it lip service. In recent time, a young child was found wandering at 4:30 in the morning, picked up at the police station. 3 or 4:30 a.m., and I'll say a.m. in the morning for amplification, for emphasis. But we're not here talking about that. We're speaking about law reform. Last week we came in here and we passed a resolution to make sailing as a national sport, recognize sailing. And it's important, I'm not taking anything away from that. But was that our priority? Did we have to do that during National Child Protection Month, when we could come in here and speak to issues that affect our children? We've heard of many heinous crimes over the past few weeks and months. Many of them. Fathers, stepfathers, older siblings, damaging these children. But we need to talk about law reform instead of law enforcement and protecting our children during the month of April. Sometime last week, it was reported that a 14-year-old was murdered. Police report still ongoing. But are we really talking about that? No. And this is National Child Protection Month. We're talking about law reform as opposed to law enforcement. I question our priority. And it's something I think we should take seriously. We're in the last quarter of this very important month. What have we done as parliamentarians, those who have been elected, to put legislation in place to protect our children during this month? Why wasn't that our focus? Not that what we're doing is not important, but I don't think it should be given priority, particularly now. You know, the member for West Grand Bahama last week during the wrap-up, he lauded the member for Garden Hills, and we all agreed. Wonderful, wonderful accomplishment during the Crifter Games. We all on board with that. However, going into the last quarter of this month, one of the push that I made as minister was the push for the implementation or the updating and the implementation of the National Youth Policy. It didn't start with me. When I checked the archives, as far back as Dr. Daniel Johnson, or even before him, he was an advocate, he pushed. Even before him. But he pushed to have the National Youth Policy implemented. During my time, we invested money into having it updated to ensure that we empower, that we protect our children, our youth, those who've been marginalized, the weak vessels. Some $1 million was allocated for that purpose. When I look at this year's budget, not $1 million, not $500,000, not a quarter, not $100,000, $70,000 was allocated for the implementation of the National Youth Policy. How can that work? And I believe the minister, he wants more money. We need to give him more money. He's doing a good job in sports. And he needs the money also to ensure that this policy is updated and implemented to give our youth teeth, empower them, protect our children, protect our women. Colleagues, the time to do it is now, not tomorrow. We are the legislators. We are the one that has been mandated to protect our children. The time to do it now, not tomorrow. And this brings me to a story that was told of a young boy that got lost in an African village. You know, the mother came to the chief nearing the end of the day, and she said, "Chief, my son wandered off this morning into the sawgrass. By now he should have been home, but he's not yet returned. I'm concerned. Chief, I'm really concerned about him. Can you please assemble the warriors and go out and search for my child?" The chief acquiesced. He called all the warriors in. "This little boy is missing. I want you to go out and search for this child." The brave warriors, as instructed by the chief, went out to search for this child. Unfortunately, no one found the child. When they got back to the village that night, the chief said, "You know what? We're not going to give up. We're going to change our strategy. Tomorrow we're going to search for this child. But what we're going to do different this time, we're going to hold hands. We're going to form a chain, and we'll walk together. We're going to comb all of the sawgrass, not missing any detail. We'll do this until we find that child that is lost." And true to form, the following morning, they held hands, they went through the sawgrass, and the news was bittersweet. They found the child, but the child had died. The child was exposed to the elements overnight, couldn't survive. They brought the child back to the village and presented the child to his mother. As they presented the child to his mother cried out in agony, "Oh, if only we had held hands yesterday, my child would have been alive." I'm saying to all of us, today is the day that we should hold hands during this National Youth Month. We need to protect our children from the elements of sexual abuse. Right, the element of physical abuse, this is National Child Protection Month. The element of physical abuse, the element of mental abuse, the element of abandonment, the element of drugs and gang-related activities, so that we will not have to hear that mother, that grandmother, that aunt, that uncle crying, saying, "Oh Lord, why didn't we hold hands yesterday?" We have been mandated to do just that. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, I will speak little on the law reform bill, because my colleague initially covered most of what this side have to say. And I'm not a lawyer by profession, and I learned one thing to do is stay in my lane. So in my review of this document, I just came across two items that I believe that perhaps may be oversights or typos. And if you have the bill with you, I'll direct you to page number 11 of the bill. It might be a typo. Page 11 and 12, Article 18.2. Number 1, it says, "A revised edition may be placed in loose leaf or bound printed form and should bear." We come down to item 18.2, a revised edition may be placed in electronic format or may be made available electronically through the medium of a national information structure and shall bear. And then you go into a bear, the word bear is used again. So you have bear. When you look at 2B, again the word bear is repeated. So I believe the first word bear should be taken out. The structure and shall bear on every page, A, and B, and shall bear, because I was told by the lawyers that a word make a big difference. So as far as I can see, this bear should not be there. And the last thing that I discovered, again, it might be a typo, on 18, on page 12, 18.5. Copies of the revised edition may be offered to the public in printed or electronic form at a cost to be determined by the Cabinet Office. I could be off. Is it the Cabinet Office or is it the Cabinet? I don't understand. I mean, is it the Cabinet or the Cabinet Office? Can the Cabinet Office make a decision? Or because I look at the interpretation at the front and I don't see a description of Cabinet Office.
And your concern
Is it the Cabinet or the Cabinet Office, the power, the authority? I was told by the lawyers, by the legal mind, that the word make a big difference. So I'm seeing the word office following Cabinet. So is it the Cabinet or is the term Cabinet Office? Please check it. Because those are the only things from my layman perspective that I discovered with this, with respect to typos or the misplacement of words. So again, as I conclude today,
just before you,
sure.
that is again
For the articles?
not just that last part, the one with office.
Yeah, it says
What number?
20, okay, 18.5, 18.5 and 20B. Okay, thank you. As I conclude today, once again, I just want us to focus, Madam Speaker and colleagues, on our little ones and our darlings, our youth, our women. And let us hold hands in unity today to protect them against all the elements that killed that child, the natural elements. But we have other elements that are affecting our youth, that are affecting the most vulnerable in our society. And I want us to move today to hold hands so that very little harm or no harm will come to them. Colleagues, my final word to you is simply this: let our tomorrow be today. Central Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Garden Hills.
I just want to clarify something for the member, to let him know that he stated correctly that Mr. Donnie Johnson would have started the youth policy, and I want him to know the pot is still on the stove. And before we celebrate our 50th anniversary, that will be in this parliament. All right? You know, a lot of work was done, a lot of drafting, but what needs to pass that doesn't, you know, it's just 4 pieces of legislation, but what needs to get that passed, the work has been done. And so the budget that you may see now, even though it was cut prior to us coming in office, it's not necessary all at once to get the legislation passed for it. So I bet you sure, should you be around, you will witness.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And it is good to speak to history, because one of the things that I did when I first was appointed as minister, I had a conclave with all those who preceded me, including the leader, and I went back to numero uno, Mr. Kendall Norwich. And he came there in his wheelchair, son brought him there, and he had a back and forth. In fact, he took the show. And again, I had dialogue with him. What areas were you challenged? What were your successes? What were your dreams? What didn't you get done? What can I do differently? And I'm glad that you're following through. And let's make sure that at the end of the day, the youth sport and culture ministry, it has a talent, but we just need the funding. We just need the money to get things done. All right.
Thank you, Honorable Members. As many?
Madam Speaker, I just want to respond
Chair
to
recognizes
the
question
member
number
for Central Grand Bahama reference to Child Protection Month, which it is. There are many activities planned and are taking place organized by the department. In fact, there's a major event in Grand Bahama this week. We hope you attend. I know you attended the initial church service in Grand Bahama, which honored many who have looked out for young people, particularly foster parents and others. One of the things that we're doing in the ministry, just for an overview, and we'll discuss this some other time, but the ministry does not want to just have a Child Protection Month. We're trying to extend our activities beyond, to have, particularly as we develop a mass communication program, because we can talk about the issues in legislation, but what is the message? What is a resounding message that allows us to hold hands? We can't hold hands without a message. And if you look at the airspace in our country, whether it's the television, whether it's radio, whether it's social media, the reality is we're not occupying that airspace. And we have to occupy that airspace with positive messaging to get to the children and to talk to others. And we must have a message for those who violate children. And so, yes, the implementation of the law is all well and good, and we talk about it. But the issue is much broader, it's much bigger. And we must understand psychologically, we must understand where children are and why. And so we are developing a very comprehensive program that's very different, that will take us beyond the month. And you'll see in Grand Bahama next month, for instance, we're opening several homes there. Will take place around the 19th for young people. And those are intended to help those who have fallen in difficulties and those who have been maligned. All intended to do exactly what you're talking about. But our interpretation of the issues in our country today is that a more comprehensive plan is required. What I do want to see is I want to see positive messaging. I had the wonderful opportunity to attend a function last year with the leader of the opposition, together with yourself, at the Falcons event. And if you remember the messaging, even the member for Marco did a very good bit of poetry. And those are the things that I'm talking about. How do we talk to children the way they talk? How do we get messages to them to save them from getting into difficulties they face now? How do we build this generation differently? You have to reach them, and to reach them, we have to go to where their platforms are. So I am with you. And if you put it into context, Carifta is a part of youth building. Carifta is a part of what we do, but you did not mention another important program that the minister has done, the Youth Cadet Program, an incredible program. And you saw the magic of that. 10 islands were involved, 64 graduates, the top student in the program coming from Managua, the top student. So just think about the impact of that, all intended to do exactly what you're talking about. So we're on the same page, and yes, we want to hold hands, but we have to hold hands from Managua to Bimini.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I start, I just want to note that, inform the House that all support documents that I speak about would be available here. I can table if the members choose. But I want to say on behalf of Kalani, with the rain, we've gotten quite a number of potholes, and Minister, we would go around, drive to the area and pin them so that we can just send a Google to you, and that would assist you greatly so you know exactly where they are. And with respect to the child, Madam Speaker, that the member for East End spoke about, I was out exercising about 5 one morning, and coincidentally stopped by the police station. And there was a 5-year-old kid that the police have found wandering on the cable beat strip by himself at that particular time. But I was very pleased with how the female police officer had taken care of that particular child, whom she did not know, just found him. But the police had taken it upon themselves even to go home to their home and bought the necessary clothing and whatever else the child needed. And I think the police need to be congratulated for the excellent job they have done, what I witnessed myself. Madam Speaker, I rise again on behalf of the Kalani constituency to contribute to the debate on the law reform and Vision Bill 2023. It is always important when the topics of law and order reform and the functioning of our justice system emerge for public debate. And the New Day administration made promises on the campaign trail regarding law and order. The Bahamian people trusted the New Day party was sincere when it made these pledges. A year and a half into office, the people realized PLP's promises were empty, completely empty, and continuously empty. They were mere campaign talk, and last year there were 128 murders in the country, with most of them taking place in New Providence. This was one of the highest murder totals in our history. In the PLP's Blueprint Manifesto, the party pledged, quote, "We also commit to enhancing crime-fighting methodologies in our aggressive war against crime." This has not happened. Instead, the crime problem, which is situated mostly in New Providence, worsened. But I was happy to see that there may be a decrease according to the Commissioner. The PLP has not implemented any enhanced crime-fighting methodologies. They have not led an aggressive war on crime, and the armed robbers and gunmen and killers in New Providence are causing chaos. Every time the media asks the Prime Minister what he's doing on crime, he gives an empty response that amounts to lots of nothing. And the Prime Minister thinks he is clever with words because he is an astute lawyer. People see behind this pandering and passing of words, but he offers few to no plans and no strategy. The journalists and people know what he says on crime is lots and lots of nothing. Too many families, Madam Speaker, are grieving the loss of loved ones to violence. Too many homeowners have suffered break-ins and thefts. And too many business owners have been robbed. Too many of our girls and women have been victims of beatings and sexual violence, including rape. We can no longer, Madam Speaker, keep our heads in the sand, as this is contributing to mental illnesses and dysfunctionality, not only in our homes, but in our society. We sincerely hope that the police will investigate thoroughly allegations of violence and rape against a member. Serious allegations were made against the police, and investigations need to be done there. Investigations cannot take almost a year, as was the case with Elizabeth. Investigations against known FNMs were completed quickly. We expect this to occur in this particular case. The women in Kalani, Madam Speaker, it was amazing that I was in the gym the other day and there was 20 or so women, and all of them were asking the question about the investigation because they're concerned. Madam Speaker, the question must be asked, why has the sitting member not yet been called in for questioning? I was called in by the police for questioning and interrogation with respect to the food program, and I cooperated. It would be my recommendation to the member that if the police does not call him, he should voluntarily go and state his case. Gender violence, Madam Speaker, must be quickly passed if we are serious. Marital rape must be quickly passed, again, if we are serious. Rape is rape, be it in marriage, in relationship, or otherwise. And too many women tend to lose their voices or remain silent through it all because they don't feel that there will be justice or even that there'll be justice taken seriously or delayed. And this contributes, Madam Speaker, to dysfunctional homes, society, violence, and crime. We must ask the question, who are protecting our women? The ultimate responsibility and ultimate goal of a society is to protect our women, to protect our children, and to protect the elderly. This is the responsibility of our society, Madam Speaker. The New Day administration has no answers. The administration has no policies. Our ship of state is adrift with the captain at the helm when it comes to crime, crisis, and new problems. The captain has abandoned ship for travel tour while our people struggles. When you watch the news, the prime minister in this country or that country having a fun time and making speeches. He rallies at his desk working on problems Bahamians face. Madam Speaker, the Law Reform and Revision Bill 2023 is designed to update our law creation and revision system. I support the bill, yet I remind the House that passing legislation does not substitute for having action plans and a strategy to combat violence and crime, including the underlying causes of our high crime rate. It is important to have well-organized and well-funded institutions tasked with these functions. There should be continuous efforts to ensure that antiquated laws are updated. It is important for this Parliament to pass laws to help improve the lives of our people in a timely manner. However, what must be remembered is that the people elect a party to govern. It is that party and its members who form the executive branch who are ultimately responsible for leading the country. That means the cabinet has responsibility for coming up with policies to improve our people's lives. And Madam Speaker, in order to create the proper laws that are needed, it is essential for individuals to identify the problems that the countries face, analyze the problem, brainstorm the problems, and make amendments to the laws or create new laws so as to deal with the problems. Because unless one face the problem and realize that they exist, then you cannot make the necessary amendment or the laws that are necessary. We cannot keep our heads in the sand and not identify some of the challenges that we face. While it is important to upgrade the technical lawmaking process, as this bill seeks to do, little change will happen if the cabinet is absent of ideas, focus, and leadership. And that is the problem the Bahamas face. I will give this example. After promising on the campaign trail to address the crime problem, the Prime Minister now knows he has no clues as to what to do. His new strategy is to shift everyone's focus to the role of people in the United States in the trafficking of guns to the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. Guns trafficking plays a part in our crime problem, but there are much bigger problems the Prime Minister is not tackling. He has been talking about this issue on Bahamian soil, and now he's talking about it abroad. Many were alarmed reading a story in the Tribune on Tuesday, April 18, 2023, headlined, quote, "Davis decries epidemic of violence in the Caribbean." They reported on the Prime Minister's speech in Trinidad and Tobago. The opening paragraph of the story said, quote, Prime Minister Philip Davis decried the violence gripping the Caribbean region yesterday as he continued urging the United States to solve its gun trafficking problem. The story goes on to quote the Prime Minister as saying, "We do not manufacture guns in the Caribbean. Every gun used to commit a crime in the Caribbean is smuggled into our country. We have asked the United States government, the US-based gun manufacturers to cooperate with CARICOM member states when it comes to identifying weapons purchased in the US as a part of a wider effort to hold weapons dealers and traffickers accountable for the many lives lost to gun violence each year. It went on, we must call on our neighbors to the north to better police the trafficking of guns from the U.S. to the Caribbean. The United States, end quote, United States, Madam Speaker, is our closest friend. It is our major trading partner. And the United States does an extraordinary amount to help us with law enforcement already. It makes major donations to our police force. It helps us with training our law enforcement officers. It is a key partner in our efforts to stop drugs and human smuggling. It helps us with gun trafficking and other forms of crime. And the crime problem in the Bahamas has many roots. Domestic violence is one of such roots. Madam Speaker, I would always remember, we're always saying women or men beating women. I would always remember living in the Grove, Exuma Street, which has now been changed to Amos Ferguson Street. And there was a neighbor next door to me. I won't call the name because everyone in the Grove would know. And almost every day, that lady beat her husband. Almost every day we heard him screaming. But men are usually embarrassed to inform the police or public that they are being bashed. So it's two-way street. But either way is wrong. Either way causes dysfunctionality. Either way causes mental disturbances, which affects crime and creates some of the problems that we face here today. We have done a poor job in terms of developing our people. Unemployment is chronically high. More needs to be done to provide Bahamians with affordable and quality health care and housing. Too many Bahamians have poor conflict resolution skills, leading simple arguments to turn out into violent confrontations. These are the major issues we, the Bahamian people, must address to improve our country. They are all contributing factors to our crime problem. We must own this and work on fixing what is wrong within our communities. We should continue to partner with the United States and other friendly nations in law enforcement matters. No leaders of the Bahamas should suggest that some other country is at the heart of our problem. Guns are obviously an issue, but the greater problems are our culture of violence and the dysfunction of our criminal justice system. So I say, for God's sake, we have to tackle these problems. We cannot continue to ignore them. What are the Prime Minister's plans to address this culture and the problems in the justice system? Madam Speaker, just at CARICOM, one of the Prime Ministers at the CARICOM meeting talked about the bail in the Bahamas and the crime. And that particular individual stated that the Prime Minister, the judges in the Bahamas issuing such bails contributing to crime, the judges must obviously, and I quote, not living in the Bahamas. They must be living in Mars. And yet the Prime Minister did not defend the judiciary here in our Bahamas. Regardless of how I may feel, if he did, it was not publicized. It was not publicized. And I'm certain when you speak, you will address that for us. I'm certain you will address that. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister is failing miserably on law and order. These speeches he gives talking about guns from the US are part of an effort to deflect away from failure. He got the deficit number wrong and sought to blame others. On the FTX debate, he hides, you could talk afterward. On the FTX debacle, he hides behind talk of subjudice. Subjudice. Duck, deflect, hide, ponder, and pass. This is what the member for Cat Island is at best. The Prime Minister isn't leading, he is constantly covering. The Bahamian people want law and order restored in our Bahamas. And they want and need a leader who has vision to do so. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's refusal to directly address questions on FTX is deeply disturbing and reflects a pattern. Much of what has been said on FTX is in the public domain. On a host of issues related to FTX, the Prime Minister is hiding behind talk of subjudice. We are not asking the Prime Minister to prejudice the courts, but listen to where I'm going. For example, the Nassau Guardian reported on December 30th last year, quote, the Davis administration has hired a U.S. law firm to help it with public relations and communications regarding the collapse of cryptocurrency exchange FTX. Went on, the Nassau Guardian obtained a copy of the engagement letter between the government and Brown Rudnick LLP. The letter from Clara Quivoy, head of digital commerce at Brown Rudnick, is dated December 6, 2022, and addressed to Attorney General Ryan Pinder. Quivo wrote, "Dear Ryan, we are very pleased that the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has engaged Brown Rudnick LLP. This letter sets forth the basis on which Brown Rudnick will provide certain non-legal services, the scope of such services, and terms and conditions on which we will perform them." Quivo continued, "We have agreed to represent the Bahamas as of the date hereof in connection with its public relations and communications regarding FTX Digital Market Limited and its respective affiliates and subsidiaries and their owners, managers, employees, and counterparties." Quivo noted that Brown and Rudnick may be required to register as an agent of a foreign principal under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, due to these activities. She wrote, "Fees for our services will be based on the time expended by each lawyer and other Brown Rudnick personnel, including personnel we temporarily engage on your matter. Multiplied by that person's hourly rate, Brown Rudnick will apply a 10% fee discount to all invoices." The letter notes that payments are due within 30 days of the date of statement. If the foregoing correctly reflects our understanding, please sign, date, and return to me the enclosed copy of this letter, Quivo stated. The letter ends with a heading that reads, "Consented and agreed to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas." Regarding its work for the Bahamas, Brown Rudnick noted that it already spent $30,801.50 in connection with various administrative tasks, including printing, research fees, and travel. In a separate document filed in the U.S. Justice Department as part of its obligation to register under FARA, Brown Rudnick said, "Given the significant attention by the U.S. government and media surrounding the collapse of FTX, Brown Rudnick anticipates that it may perform additional activities which fall outside the legal exemption that require Brown Rudnick to communicate on behalf of the Bahamas with media outlets in the U.S. and or U.S. government agencies and or participate in meetings with representatives of the U.S. media and/or government agencies to discuss the Bahamas' activities and bona fides. Roderick anticipates that it may also contribute to written materials taking a position on the same, may share such materials through its website or social media, or may commit to the U.S. media on such materials. It added, note that we have yet to begin providing services under this agreement. The document noted that Brown and Rudnick will prepare and disseminate information via magazine, newspaper, lectures, speeches, email, websites, social media, press releases, letters, or telegrams. And that information will be disseminated to public officials, legislators, government agencies, newspapers, editors, educational groups. Will the Prime Minister and the government please confirm the details of this story, none of which are sub judice? Has this law firm or any other law firm or public relations company being hired by the Davis administration? And what services are this firm or any other firms providing? How much has this cost or is costing the Bahamas? The answer to these are related, and related questions have nothing to do with sub judice. The country wants to know how public funds are being spent and who is representing the country. Moreover, they are seeking to protect the reputations and or offer legal assistance to any particular Bahamians, including the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, or any other of his ministers or PLP officials or donors. In the interest of law and order and transparency, why is the Prime Minister ducking questions on FTX? Madam Speaker, the Nassau Guardian editorial, November 22nd last year, Prime Minister Philip Davis, statement in Parliament last week that he has every confidence that the Bahamas will emerge from the proceedings involving FTX with an enhanced reputation as a solid digital assets jurisdiction was far from convincing. If anything, the Prime Minister appeared to possess an unhealthy level of delusion over the reputational damage that is already evident as a result of the fallout from the calamitous collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange, which had been welcomed with open arms by the Davis administration and which operated from the Bahamas. It appears without any real evidence of a corporate governance structure. The Bahamas is getting a black eye at every turn on this, and it is impossible to find any benefit in turning a blind eye to that reality. The editorial continued. In Parliament last week, the Prime Minister also said that to date, we have not identified any deficiencies in our regulatory framework that could have avoided this. That statement had many people who are closely watching this FTX debacle wondering if Davis's declaration was premature. Yesterday, the Prime Minister also said criticisms of the Bahamas in the wake of the FTX failure is an unfair characterization, and that he was not concerned about the jurisdiction's reputation, though he acknowledged there are reputational consequences. The strong criticism, Madam Speaker, of the jurisdiction and questions about the strength of our regulatory regime are coming from many sources, including the Wall Street Journal, which recently noted, quote, having regulations and enforcing them are two different things. It noted, too, that while it is still unclear how severely FTX collapse will affect the Bahamas, experts expect it will harm the country and its reputation as a crypto hub. We cannot imagine what the Prime Minister is basing his conclusion on, that the country will emerge with an enhanced reputation. Time will tell. But as this sordid saga plays on, his declaration seems more wishful thinking than grounded. Madam Speaker, I went through that Because it's essential when you're talking about law reform, creating new laws, amendment to laws, it's essential for you to identify the challenges and the problems we face, be it FTX, be it domestic violence, be it crime. Unless we're prepared to openly speak about them, we cannot make the necessary laws or learn from the experience that was presented to us so that we can make the necessary laws and amendments so that governments moving forward, either present or future governments, would not fall in the same category or make mistakes. Madam Speaker, this is precisely the problem with the Prime Minister on issues ranging from crime to healthcare, to education, to other national problems. And it is essential, Madam Speaker, it is essential that many of the issues that we face today, we must be open, we must be honest, and we must be transparent. Some things we may not necessarily like, but in the interest of the country and for future generations, we must be prepared to make the hard decisions and make the necessary amendments in the law. Madam Speaker, the law reform I totally support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West Bromwich.
Madam Speaker, not to have interfered with the member for Kalani and his contribution, but I wanted to ask for his reference to the Prime Minister ducking matters pertaining to FTX be expunged, because the member for Kalani is quite aware that the Prime Minister in the last session of the House made it very clear that the matter is sub judice. The rule of the House is that any matter before the court, Madam Speaker, and it says and it states, any reference to a matter awaiting or under adjudication in a court will not be permitted unless the Speaker's discretion that reference will not interfere in any material way with that court matter. That is what the Prime Minister, and he was responsible. As a responsible advocate of the court, the Prime Minister said, and a member of this House, that the matter is sub judice, and he will deal with it at appropriate time. So for the member for Kalani to suggest that the Prime Minister is ducking, I think that is inappropriate, and I think the member should either withdraw or have you take it from the record.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I agree with with the procedures, and I will have that stricken from the record. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member from Mount Moriah.
Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, each time I rise in this place, I do so ever knowing that all roads in my political career begins and end in Mount Moriah and is forever linked to the residents that I serve on a daily basis. Many believe that it has become routine for members of Parliament to merely mention one's constituency prior to commencing a member's contribution, and that it is merely perfunctory. Madam Speaker, I hasten to say that it is the exact opposite. Deputy Speaker, I hasten to say that it is the exact opposite for this member. I am a part of my constituency, and my constituency is a part of me. Deputy Speaker, Mount Moriah is a community that pulls together during rough times, notwithstanding our difference in political persuasions. And this is because our community is not centered merely around politics, but centered around fundamental principles of love and respect and commitment to advancing our community. Deputy Speaker, our community is not perfect, only heaven is, but I stand here to tell you we are that we are exceptional. And on the heels of Carifta, I remind the public that we are the Mecca for cultural, political, and sporting icons. Least the public forgets, we are the home of Tony Williams-Darling, the home of Shawnee Miller-Weibo, the home of Devane Shelton, gold medalist in the 60-meter hurdles at the 2022 World Indoor Champions, the home of Gennaro Miller, who recently signed with the Miami Marlins, the home of Leonard Boston Blackie Miller, the home of living cultural icon and brothers Jermaine Williams, the leader of the Immortals Junkanoo Group, and Eric Knowles, affectionately known as Scrap, the leader of the Prodigal Sons, the home of the late Mr. Basil Roll, the master in Shotokan, and his sons, Marcus Roll, Julian Roll, and the Haven Roll, the home of the chess champion, Deja Johnson, the third best chess player in the country and leading lady for the Chess Olympics, who is a testament not only to her hard work, but also a testament to her father, Mr. Darvin Johnson, the proprietor of Dad's Restaurant, and was the home of the leader of His Majesty's official opposition, the member for Marco City, Michael Pintard. We are the home, the Mecca for political, cultural icons. And we also, least I forget, and would be remiss if I were to forget, and cannot forget, the home of Mr. Arnold A. Forbes, Esquire. Not only was he born in Mount Moriah, but became the Member of Parliament for Mount Moriah. He is a giant of a man and a political trendsetter. Last but not least, the second home of the present Member of Parliament for Mount Moriah, yours truly. There is a common thread of decency, of collaboration that is interwoven in each subdivision in Mount Moriah. That is Stapleton Gardens, Yellow Elder Gardens, and Millennium Gardens. This is evidenced by the support that is displayed to our kindness and togetherness that is always displayed when we lose members of our great community. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have lost a young man in our community by the name of Michael Musgrove, better known as Cheese. I met with his family and expressed condolences on behalf of the community and my family. Although being a very young man, he was respected and loved by our community. Our community leaders don't all dress alike, Deputy Speaker. Many of our leaders don't wear suit and ties, and as Rastas would say, jacket and tie. Many of our leaders are young. They don't have gray hair or gray beards. Many of our leaders never walked into the House of Assembly and have no ambitions of doing so. But many of them command more respect than those that wear suits and ties because their words match their actions. And what we do say matters, Deputy Speaker, and as the Honourable Member for Carmichael has often quoted, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Deputy Speaker, as it relates to today's bill, my colleagues have done a scholarly job on explaining and highlighting the necessity for this bill. I have learned very early in my legal practice to leave well enough alone. Mount Moriah, for the reasons mentioned by my colleagues, support this bill, but also supports the bill because of the importance of the bills, the things mentioned within the bill. But notwithstanding, I would like to say that this bill is further evidence of the comprehensive approach the Davis-Cooper legislative agenda is having on our country. The codification of our laws is imperative to good governance. It is not a controversial bill, so I don't expect to be very long in providing my support for this bill. Also, on the point of bills and laws, I would also like to highlight Mr. David Forbes, who I now refer to as a living monument to good practice and parliamentary procedures. If he was not restrained by this post, he would easily qualify as a commissioner under this bill. I would also like to recognize Mr. Maurice Tynes, who has ensured that the process by which we administer the work here has set an extremely high benchmark. And Mr. Flowers, who is also working his way through the ranks. I see you, Mr. Flowers. Continue the good work. And also is able Asheron, who is also always doing a wonderful job in carrying out her duties here in this house. Yeah, the 3 commissioners, the job is done. And you know, this government is always in the hiring of looking for good talent. And I would also like to recognize the late Michelle Roll, the sister of Mr. Frankie, former Minister Frankie Campbell, who has passed away as well. She is gone but not forgotten in our community of Mount Moriah. I would like to express my condolences to her family. There are some things, I believe, that are much bigger than politics, much bigger than politics. And this is why I'm so happy to be a part of this administration, because we continue to put people over politics. And that is expressed in what we do here in this House, but also outside of this place. And as I said earlier, that our words are aligned with our deeds. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I will not push at an open door or speak longer than is necessary on a bill that is non-controversial. I think we all agree that it's something, most of us agree, the majority of us agree, that this bill is necessary. It is something that we need to codify our laws to ensure that members of our society are able to find the laws, and because even though we may speak to the ignorance of the law is no defense, we must do what is necessary to ensure that persons are equipped with the law. And as the honorable member for St. Anne's would have mentioned, that it is a very arduous task for attorneys to find the laws. And so this is one step closer to allowing members of the public to be armed with the information that they need in order to defend themselves in court or in their business enterprises. And so for those reasons mentioned, Deputy Speaker Mount Moriah supports this bill.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Long Island.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I'm pleased to rise in this place on behalf of the great people of Long Island, who I have the great privilege of representing here for the 2nd consecutive term. Mr. Deputy, I want to begin by wishing a belated happy birthday to my grandfather, who turned 89 last week on the 11th. So to him, Bishop Gibson, a man of faith, a man of honor and integrity, a prayerful man, a man who I aspire to embody all of the good traits and qualities that he represents. I continue to be a work in progress, but certainly he is a role model, an honorable gentleman. Mr. Deputy, I also want to give condolences to the family of Ms. Inez Adderley, particularly her husband, former principal and teacher and principal, Mr. Lawrence Adderley. I wish to also express my sympathies to the family of Ms. Zerlene Taylor and extend my condolences, particularly to her daughter, Tracy, her granddaughter, Nisha, and the entire family. Mr. Deputy, I'm going to be very, very brief with respect to my commentary on this legislation, or this proposed legislation, this bill. Mr. Deputy, we see, just on a cursory glance, or even an in-depth read of this, you don't see any major changes to the law. These are all minor amendments. Whilst I understand and appreciate the need for updating the law, this, frankly, is a redo of the legislation that already existed. Mr. Deputy, there's nothing really groundbreaking, just a handful of slight changes to the previous act, repeating much of what already existed. And so I share the sentiments that were expressed by at least two of my colleagues here today, the member for East Grand Bahama as well as the member for St. Anne's. You know, we are expecting monumental and radical change and far-fetching, far-reaching legislation, and we're looking forward to that, those kinds of legislation coming forward. We appreciate the insights with respect to technological advancements and so on and so forth. Mr. Deputy, I want to note, though, that the current Law Reform Act, the one that's being repealed, limits the appointee or the appointees as being someone with the experience of having had judicial office or some experience as a legal practitioner or a teacher of law in a university, versus what is now proposed. This bill would allow for the appointment of anyone who a prime minister believes has, quote, special qualifications, training, or experience, and that includes a public officer. So in this case, why are we reducing or watering down or removing the legal experience requirements and qualifications needed for persons to sit on this committee? Is it possible that this bill would also make for an extremely political commission? You know, Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister's office, which is the office, not the person or the holder, you know, we look at another part of the bill which speaks to commissioners. It says that, so right now, you're looking for commissioners to be appointed by the Prime Minister going forward, whomever that person might be. This proposed piece of legislation seeks to displace the Governor General as the person who would be making those appointments. And now we see that the numbers for persons appointed to the commission will be reduced, or the time frame that they can serve will be reduced from the current 5-year appointment period to 3 years. So you see a watering down somewhat of the legislation from the qualifications necessary to become commissioners to the time frame that these persons are sitting as commissioners to who can appoint persons to the commission. So, you know, so one wonders what led to the reduction in the time frame for the appointments from 5 to 3 years. Mr. Deputy, moving along, I want to speak to my constituency. You know, since we lost the government, Long Island has come to a standstill, and I mean that literally. I'd like to see, I would like to join, and I heard a colleague of mine thanking, I think the member for, my good friend, the member for Golden Isles today. I'd like to join some members in thanking ministers in here too. However, there's nothing to thank anyone for. So we got a number of challenges. Let's look at the sporting facilities. And Millis Park, you know, the Bahamas Games is coming up, and the park is in a state of deterioration. Bleachers are broken down, the scorer's booth broken down, and the facilities need an upgrade. In fact, all of the sports facilities in Long Island are in a state of disrepair. All. Millis Park, Clarencetown Park. In fact, at Clarencetown, where the kids go to have their district sports meets and other events, we need a Mundo track. We need proper lighting. Bleachers. The bleachers are falling to pieces. You know, we need, even the school basketball courts can be upgraded and repaired. We don't have any track and field, proper track and field facility on the island. And so all of the sporting facilities on Long Island needs repair and upgrading, all of them. During my time at another place, Mr. Deputy, we sent a brand new water truck to Long Island. That was meant to service the areas that didn't have any pipe works, as everyone can appreciate. You do these works incrementally. So the staff and residents had been complaining that the water truck that was there at the time had a number of mechanical issues and a leaky tank. So we procured 2 trucks at one time sent one to Long Island and sent the other to Eleuthera. Interestingly, the one that was sent to Long Island was shipped out a year or so ago, and that has caused some water challenges with those folks who need water at different points on the island, particularly those areas that aren't serviced by pipe work. Again, during my time at the other place, I would have sent, we sent pipes to carry out waterworks in Millis. We cleared down the roadside for the works, removing all the bush and other impediments. But the question is, where are the pipes today? And why wasn't the work done in Millis? Millis, the work is still not done in Millis. And we don't know where the pipes are that were sent to Long Island. Millions were earmarked for waterworks from Burn Ground to Seymour's Long Island via a Caribbean Development Bank loan. We would have signed that contract had the election not been called. However, the Caribbean Development Bank was reviewing the independent engineering consultant's report at the time, and they were about to give final sign-off for us to move ahead with signing that contract to bring water works to northern Long Island, the most northern points, Burn Ground to Seymour's. So the question is, what happened to that project? Why have we not heard anything about that project since that time? And then, of course, you have the Long Island Airport. You've not received any concrete update with respect to this airport. And we've been waiting for this airport for many, many years. But during the time that we were in office, we undertook the architectural work. We completed the environmental impact assessment report. We completed a survey plan. The engineering works were done. Tenders went out, bids came in, and to my understanding, the bids were reviewed. So what happened? You know, what happened to the airport? Where's the contract? Why wasn't it signed? What's the latest development with respect to the airport for Long Island? Mr. Deputy, in Long Island, we continue to play a game called Duck a Hole. Duck a Hole. You know, driving on Long Island is like driving on a golf course with large potholes. I mean, just you're talking about persons losing tires, axles, wheel, other issues. I mean, your whole extension you got to replace driving in Long Island. The driving experience between Grace and Seymour's is the worst. You're talking about the roadway being littered with potholes of all types, varying sizes. The worst. Central Long Island needs some work, particularly between Buckley's and Petty's, where you have the road sinking at points, going on a bit of an airplane, you have potholes, etc. But from Grace to Seymour's, my gosh, the road is in a horrendous state, and we need help. Mr. Deputy, I often spoken about some 5 miles of road in North Long Island that was supposed to have been paved over the last 3 years. And a contract was awarded, and I've complained that the contractor has been placing the signs for the settlements in the wrong places. I know that they've met with local government, etc., but the signs remain in the wrong places. The signs are misspelled. The settlements are misspelled, some of them. Some of the signs are in the wrong location, where another settlement is supposed to be. And frankly, some of the road signs, particularly the signs that the yield or corner stop signs, are too small. There's a school zone sign that's right, and this is a school zone sign at North Long Island High, that's right at the pedestrian crossing. I mean, that don't make any sense. Makes no sense. It should be some ways away where people could see the sign and understand that, especially if it's tourists, understand that they need to brake or slow down because they're entering a school zone. So these signs, we would hope that they would move to replace these signs with signs of a more appropriate size, that they would consult the residents, the people of Long Island, about where the settlements are. You know, we submitted, when we were in office, I got a CD from Tex Turnquest, one of the foremost realtors on Long Island, and he had laid out all the settlement markings. And I think I had submitted that. I know I submitted a copy previously to the Ministry of Works. But that showed where all of the settlements are. You know, it's a settlement, I think, you know, you cannot change settlement names, man. Okay, there's settlement names that we see are completely changed. And this should not happen. Okay, some consultation would be most helpful. But with respect to the road in North Long Island, those 5 miles of road, it shouldn't take 3 years to pave 5 miles of road and to continue to put the quarry down. Folks get in accidents, get asthma, get other issues. They go back, they put more quarry down. We're waiting for them to put down the asphalt, the hot mix. And we've been waiting now almost 4 years for that to happen. Mr. Deputy, yes, a contract was signed in 2020 during COVID, so no work could happen then. But it's been 2 years since you all have come to office, so nothing has happened since. Mr. Deputy, in Long Island, we have no recreational spaces, no parks, no proper parks on the island. And we're hoping that when the government moves to create parks, that Long Island is considered for at least 3 parks. One in Central, one in South, one in North. We have places cleared off land that we call parks, but they're not parks. They're not proper parks. I know that there was a plan under the last the former Minister of Works, the last administration, to put parks on these islands. And I'd written to the minister at the time, and that should still be on file, requesting parks to be placed at certain points along the island. Mr. Deputy, I also want to note that the clinics on Long Island, we have we have challenges with medicine at the clinics. Challenges with medicine. Persons are complaining that they aren't able to get diabetes medication. They aren't able to get medication for hypertension. These are all basic meds that should be at the clinics. And my constituents are complaining that when they go to the clinic for these things, people are getting slips to send to Nassau or to find a pharmacy of some sort to service or to fill these to get their medication. Come on. You know, you cannot have the 2 main clinics on the island without proper medicine. And my island is an island where most of my constituents are 50 years old and above. So I'd say at least 55% or thereabouts would be across 50. And this is why I'm so keen to see these road signs, properly sized road signs, because when you get older, you start to have sight challenges as well. Mr. Deputy, in 2021, an IDB loan was gotten for clinic repairs and renovation, and funds were earmarked for works at the clinic in Deadman Ski, in addition to a brand new ambulance. And we continue to hope that we'll be able to have these works done, which will to include a lab, a new ambulance, a completely refurbished, renovated, up-to-date clinic. you know, we're sick of picking up our people from the side of the road, the back of trucks. Sick of picking up our people on plywood, because the clinics don't even have stretchers. And so we're hearing a lot of promises, but we would like to see some kind of works happening to that clinic in Deadman's Key. And also there was some work to be done at the clinic in Sims. And I believe that, I know for a fact that today, the morgue in Deadman's Key has not been in working condition for some time now. Okay, so bodies have to be transported for many miles down to the clinic in North Long Island. And sometimes you have, you know, the clinic, the morgues could only hold so many people. So I think they only built to hold about 3 bodies at a time. And I remember there was a time when there was about 6 or 7 bodies at the clinic in Sims. So folks had to come in and quickly embalm bodies to preserve them, because now you had to have, another one had to go into the morgue. So the clinic, these both are the main clinics in Long Island, are in desperate need of repairs. And we would like for that morgue also, in the immediate, to be fixed in Deadman's Key. As I conclude, Mr. Deputy, I want to note that police officers have complained, business owners and residents have complained. The police have no vehicles in North Long Island. I've raised this issue in recent time. So in other words, the police in North Long Island are not able to quickly respond to any complaints or concerns raised by business houses or residents in that part of the island. Sometimes you hear the police cars, the sirens blaring, coming up north from down south. But in Long Island, we turn it the other way around. But these, I mean, you can imagine, by the time the police get to a scene, if there's a robbery or some incident, persons are long gone. You know, we had an incident lately where there's a plane that landed in Long Island, and they left, some folks left the plane in the middle of the runway, a suspected drug trafficking exercise. And by the time the police were able to get there, the plane was empty, persons had disappeared, and the plane was just sitting in the middle of the runway. That plane remains in Long Island. So, Mr. Deputy, we're hoping that the police in the north of the island will be properly equipped with vehicles so that they're able to service the residents of northern Long Island. Mr. Deputy, I thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair.
While he was speaking, because he did make reference to some issues associated with the clinics in Long Island, and I would like to say a few words because I know the residents of Long Island is listening. I want to assure the residents of Long Island that under the IDB loan facility, we have major plans for the renovation of the Dr. David Simmons Memorial Health Center. But I also want to speak specifically to 3 contracts that I'm about to award in Long Island. One for the Sims Clinic, one for the doctor's residence, and another one for the Dr. David Sims Memorial Health Center. These 3 contracts were approved by way of cabinet, and we are about to issue these contracts so the residents of Long Island will know that my visit to Long Island will not be in vain, and those repairs are very much on the way. The member for Long Island also spoke about the challenges that we have with logistics and moving medications from New Providence to the Family Islands. We are working very diligently to resolve those issues. They are long-standing. They have to do with the mailboat services that are sometimes canceled when important medications need to be shipped. And even though he said there's no medication, I beg to disagree. We may be having some challenges, not only with Long Island. I had a similar challenge the other day in Acklands, as well as in Inagua. And if weather stops a mailboat from going into the southern Bahamas, That sometimes could be a delay of a week, sometimes 2 weeks, or whatever the delays may be. We're trying to find ways how to get appropriate medications to our far-flung clinics by way of air transport. As far as what we are doing with our reconstructing of ground services throughout the Family Islands, under the IDB loan facility, I want the residents of Long Island to know that we intend to do emergency medical services on all of our Family Islands. And a few weeks ago, we graduated our first class of EMT technicians who are destined for the southern Bahamas and our Family Islands to improve ground transportation with connectivity with clinics. These things are happening. I'm about to do my second batch of EMT training. And of course, we would advertise in Long Island again because it's a Long Island, and we have to be able to do a better job with ground transport. So the residents of Long Island could rest assured, as far as the Ministry of Health is concerned, we intend to live up to those obligations necessary to improve the quality of primary health care services in Long Island and by extension throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Deputy, I just want to thank the member for Tall Pines for his intervention. Does my heart glad, Tall Pines, and I'm certain that my constituents were pleased to hear what you've just said. And I do ask that when you are issuing the contracts, or when those contracts are being awarded, that Long Islanders have an opportunity, Long Island contractors have an opportunity to get those contracts. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I wish to give thanks to Almighty God for this opportunity to once again be able to speak on behalf of and in conjunction with the residents of Marco City and on behalf of any number of Bahamians throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who still grapple with a number of pressing issues that we are all tasked with addressing. Mr. Deputy, I would like to first extend condolences to the entire Marco City family, but in particular to Mr. Penniman and his three sons, especially Bernard, on the sudden passing of Bernadine, a dedicated member of our team. Our hearts go out to the family. We also extend condolences to Sherry on the passing of Van Johnson, and to Jan Roberts on the passing of Bishop Huden Roberts, and to the entire family, but certainly KJ on the passing of Bernardina Major, and to Annie, Ms. Gibson, we are praying for you on the passing of Chantel. We eulogize, laid to rest, Robert Williams and Christine Outen and Angela Moss just this past weekend, a tremendous amount of grief for so many families throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, including our very own chaplain, Bishop Gregory Minnis, on the passing of his mother. And now we've learned other members of our team have lost close family members as well. The Honorable Frankie Campbell, I understand, is also counted in that number. We pray for all of you. And daily, we thank God for life. We recognize how fragile it is. Mr. Deputy, because of the tremendous amount of grief so many Bahamian families go through, I've tried to organize my life in a way that I cherish life, I live it to the fullest, I do my best to fulfill the mission I believe that God has given me, and try as best possible to live peaceably with as many persons as possible. I come to the House because I believe that we have a solemn duty to try and lighten the burden of every Bahamian, regardless of their political colors. Mr. Deputy, sometimes when we raise issues in this House, we hear the familiar refrain that has existed in this House for decades, and that is, when you all were in, you all did this. That kind of trite exchange, and we often say to members on the other side that you're in the chair, we expect you to fix it, fix the challenges. But I want to make it a little bit more personal. Mr. Deputy, I represent a constituency that the present member for Kit Island, Rumkins, and Salvador once had an interest in representing. I thought it was a fascinating story to hear the member for Kit Island talk about having been set up and ready to go in Marco City during that particular time. He was not successful in getting that nomination, but to his credit, he went on to be elected and have been elected multiple times in Kit Island, Rumkins, and Salvador. But I represent a constituency that the founder of our party represented. Prior to 2017, we've had a number of members of parliament who have done a commendable job in helping to change the community. For 5 consecutive elections, the seat has changed hands, and God has been good. The people of Marco City has given me 2 consecutive opportunities to represent them. It's to the credit of the team that assisted, not because I was so absolutely gifted. No, we had a team, a solid team. What was interesting about the team, Mr. Deputy, is a team that was made up of, and still is, primarily those who have historically supported the Free National Movement, but a great many of those persons have supported other political organizations. I can think of at least 3 members who were stalwarts of the Progressive Liberal Party who came with us in 2017. They were disillusioned for any number of reasons. We made the case to them that we would behave differently, and they supported us. In 2021, they stayed with us, as did a number of members of the Progressive Liberal Party, who today do not identify themselves as F&Ms. They make it absolutely clear where they stand philosophically, but they voted for our team again. I think it's in part because the brand of politics that we practice is a brand that seeks to empower all Bahamians. We believe that we create employment by growing the economy, identifying suitable candidates, making sure they fill vacancies once they apply in an appropriate manner. We don't believe that we create employment by unemploying people who we perceive to be from another side. And so Mr. Deputy, in Grand Bahama, as a case in point, urban renewal, under the Free National Movement, functioned as close as possible to the terms of reference for urban renewal. It wasn't busy with people signing in, leaving the job, and going to do politics. We depoliticized the urban renewal we met. I'm speaking in Grand Bahama. And no less than members on that side, including the member for West End and Bimini, acknowledged. It was a professional team that worked there. In the case of Marco City, over a 4.5-year period, I visited that office, the physical office, no more than 4 times. I believe it was 3 times. I made contributions when they made requests, but I participated in their events each time I had an opportunity and I was invited, but did not get involved in seeking to direct or adversely influence the way in which they dealt with constituents in general. Why is this relevant, Mr. Deputy? It's relevant because, unfortunately, we talk a lot about what should happen in this country, what should happen in this parliament, and how we ought to join hands and work in tandem with each other. But this administration that is presently running the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is quite possibly one of the most tribalistic administrations that I have seen and experienced in my adult life in politics. That doesn't apply to all the ministers, let me be clear. There are members on the other side you're able to call, and they are not going to say one thing to your face and do something different. They would seek to help the people who you direct to them. But that is few and far in between. There's one rule for this administration, and there is a different rule for the rest of the Bahamas. And that doesn't mean, and let me say to people who are observing and listening, that doesn't mean we don't intend, or I don't intend, to be civil, cordial, to engage in social events on occasion, because we can't keep up with the amount of social events the Progressive Liberal Party put on, but on occasion, because we believe that civility and being cordial and collegial is important in a modern democracy, lest we fall into a pattern of behavior where we are spewing venom and plotting on each other. And believe you me, Bahamians, lots of plotting going on. As we discuss the Law Reform and Revision Bill, I can't help but remind the Bahamian people, as I've said before, there is one rule for members of the Progressive Liberal Party and their friends and their allies, and there is a different rule for their political opponents and other Bahamians.
Don't get distracted.
Their focus when it comes to investigations by any means necessary, when they have persons in their crosshair who they wish to pursue and to prosecute. And sometimes the investigation is done within the context of ministries or other organs of the government or uniform branches that report to government. However, when members of their team have issues, they are slow to act, slow to investigate, and they work diligently, in my estimation, to ensure that some matters never see the light of day. So today, we discuss the Law Reform and Revision Bill. As my colleagues have indicated already, we support the bill. We support bills that come to the Parliament that improve the condition of the Bahamas and the Bahamians. Some bills help us to make significant, in some cases revolutionary changes and leap forward in our progress. Others provide marginal improvement to where we are now. The Law Reform and Revision Bill, the one that we have before us, is one such bill that we believe incrementally move us forward in terms of modernizing our legislature. We've already litigated in this discussion that there are some useful elements in this bill. But I share the view that this is an administration steeped in overselling and under-delivering. They did it in Grand Bahama when it came to the sale of the hotel with much fanfare. They talked about dereliction of duty by the past administration and how they struck a better deal. And to thunderous applause, they sold us a bill of goods that turned out not to be what it was represented. It's not uncommon. They promised, as it relates to electricity, that they will cause a review to happen with a view of lowering costs, no matter how they try to spin it. You're not going to review it. What you're reviewing it for if the intention is not to lower the burden of energy on the backs of Bahamians. Instead, they've done the exact opposite. They've caused a 35% and counting increase of electricity bills for struggling Bahamians, small businesses, and by the time they finish with their 13-month price hike, it'll be closer to 100%, quite possibly, for some businesses. And they did that because they're not good at taking advice, but they're even better at seeking to hide untruths that they spewed, no less than in this place on multiple occasions, and have no shame and continue to return and talk strong. You can't be wrong and strong. Mr. Deputy, there's one rule for this administration, and there's a different rule for everybody else. So we're facing issues today. Strong accusations against members of that administration in a variety of areas. Assault with a vehicle, assault with a knife, strong accusations. But the pace at which the police move to investigate to determine whether or not these are accurate is exceptionally slow. It is in our interest that if ever we're accused, it is in your interest to clarify it so that a cloud could be removed from over one's head. But instead, Mr. Deputy, this administration has a fundamentally different approach in terms of addressing accusations when it's laid at their feet. We have proof positive that when accusations are laid on this side, the police is swift to act, meticulous in its investigations, and resolute in pursuing what it is pursuing. The question is, can the same rules, or shouldn't the same rules, apply to all of our citizens? Mr. Deputy, when we, in Parliament, a part of our duty is to raise and address pressing issues that affect the Bahamian people. And one of the things we ought to be doing is to demonstrate that we are responsive to the cries and the afflictions of the Bahamian people. So if today there is an outcry for resources so that small and medium-sized businesses, micro-enterprises can get started, can participate in benefiting from the bounty of this country, then we should find ways, either in policy or when we come in this place, to create opportunities for our people. Instead, today we are still searching for the increased resources, grants, equity loans, etc., by this government, which it stated was in the budget, in order to help our people. We can't find the figure. We can't find the $50 million. We should expect, given the carnage on our streets, the carnage in our homes, the bloodshed occasionally in our schools, we expect that when we, imagine this, against the backdrop of some of the most sensational crimes recently and accusations, we come in the House and mum's the word. We don't pivot. We don't pivot for an important, marginally important bill, because you can't stop doing the regular work of the country because there are crises or sensational happenings, no matter how tragic. You have to do them all. We work simultaneously. But at a minimum, you can pivot to address these issues. Yes. But it can't be that we return to the House after a series of 3 deaths in one day. Mum's the word. This is the place people are looking to us for some answers. When you listen to some members on the other side, you hear activists. That's fine. I'm an activist as well. Was arrested when the PLP was in, and I called for resignation of the then leader. Was arrested in Canada, again, protesting against racist police. Had a team of law enforcement escort us out of the administration center at Tuskegee when we took over the building because we did not agree with a position by the administration. We're activists, yes. But when you come in this House and you are on the government side, it is not about mere activism. It is about acting using the authority that you have and telling us, in light of these tragedies, this is what we intend to do. That's not what you hear. So you listen sometimes, I mean, and sometimes it sounds good. It's poetic, it's eloquent, but what it is not, intentional in terms of pointing to what concrete actions this government is taking to protect from violence girls and women, to address what they forecasted they would do, to help Bahamian men and women pass on citizenship to their children. There's a whole slew of things. And so when you talk about law reform, to the point raised by the member for Centerville, for whom I have the greatest respect and admiration, the truth is, the research, the cursory research that has been done thus far, to find out when last was the report that is referenced in this bill, when last was the annual report on law revision laid in this House. Our research thus far took us to 2011, none. In the interim, none. Now, again, maybe when somebody reported, none. So as far as I know, neither administration laid it. So we are touting things that have been in the old legislation, in the new legislation. We should be coming in here to talk about all of the deficits that have historically existed. Here they are. This is what the administration has discovered by doing an audit of law reform. And I believe the people in law reform are not so much, they are not the issue. The issue is policymakers. Because I'm sure they recommended far more substantive things to the New Day government that should have been brought to this place to address the issues that affect Bahamian people. Because I guarantee you, that in this parliament, boy, if we could find a handful of ministers and parliamentarians who are interested in this, who believe this improves the lives of anyone in their constituency, I would be absolutely stunned. What are some of the other recommendations that you did not bring, that law reform has recommended? Because that's what the issue. That's where the sweet spot is in governance and seeking to change the lives of Bahamians, addressing all of those other issues. Like, how are we spending the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that we come and approve here that Bahamians are concerned are being misused? As the members of the opposition, we have tried through the Public Accounts Committee to gain access to public servants who are duty-bound to explain how they are managing our funds. And the Prime Minister, whose duty it is to ensure that there are checks and balances in place to make sure that we manage our resources properly, has done everything possible to stop the Public Accounts Committee from operating. Consider this for a moment. While in opposition, like I say, it's one rule for the Progressive Liberal Party, and there's a different rule for everybody else. When in opposition, the Prime Minister, along with others, petitioned the then Speaker of the House to make sure that they had access to records held by the Minister administration. The Speaker ruled. No, it wasn't immediately, but he ruled and gave access to. He did what had been done by previous speakers. In fact, the founding father of our country, Sir Lyndon, did not seek to block the young Hubert Alexander Ingram from accessing information through the Public Accounts Committee. Mr. Ingram had access. Mr. Ingram didn't seek to block the Honorable Perry Christie from gaining information. He permitted it. And so what is interesting today is the very Prime Minister that petitioned and got relief, righteous relief, is now doing everything possible to block the Public Accounts Committee from holding the government accountable. One rule for them, but a different rule for everybody else. And in fact, they've gone further. Even in the Public Financial Management Act, they have sought to gut the Public Accounts Committee. So in amending the legislation that is responsible for the public financial management system, even then they looked for one additional way in which they could weaken important legislation. There's a power grab. The power grab is to reduce the role of the governor general, the role of the speaker, and to blur the lines between separation of states. So we can't talk about a new infrastructure and ecosystem for the Parliament of the Bahamas and how we intend to empower the Parliament of the Bahamas, and at the same time, every opportunity we get to grab influence away from the House, we do so. Imagine the Attorney General. Sorry, let me amend that. The unelected Attorney General, who has no constituents that he's discharging duties for, sends a letter to block the work of the Public Accounts Committee. So the question is, yeah, but he gone. So the issue here is this, that he did not act independently. He acted on instruction. Unless we have a rogue Attorney General, he acted on instruction. And so we're saying it can't be. And I encourage the public. We cannot permit it to be that one rule for the Progressive Liberal Party and those that support them and a different rule for the rest of us. Yeah. It cannot be right. And so we say that if we're going to protect the credibility of government officials, of law enforcement agencies, and other gatekeepers, then the ways in which the rules are applied, those rules have to be even-handed. We've said before, matters that you are pursuing, it is in our collective interest that you litigate those. But as you litigate those because they relate to us, what about you? Why can't we get an answer on how many taxi plates were issued? And whether or not the amount that was issued is above the allowable level, which makes that additional amount illegal to have issued. What about inadequate and inaccurate answer, however? What about us making the point that let's bring to the House, bring the section of the Housing Act and then reconcile it with the Debt Management Act and help us understand how it's possible that a corporate soul with no ability to borrow can borrow $20 million, refuse to lay the documents on the House in case we are wrong, and just keep it moving like it's like zero, it's like nothing, man. Serial lawbreaker. And so again, no, please, by all means, open book, come, bring it. Any day you're ready, all of you, bring it. The bottom line is that there's one rule for the Progressive Liberal Party and a different rule for everybody else. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we believe that it is important to bring the report to the House so we can see the litany of issues in the legislation, anomalies that exist, outdated legislation that needs to be modernized, the whole range of objectives that the Law Reform Commission addresses. And the government should properly prioritize those matters to ensure that we systematically deal with them. To the point raised earlier, if there's a need for us to hire additional persons in order for us to remedy those things that are an albatross around our national neck, then we should do so. The backlogs that we have in the court system, I find it is tragic. That's part of why the public is often disillusioned with policymakers. That if persons can't get justice because they can't even get before a court to have an appropriate hearing, that's an issue. So if we need to allocate additional resources to hire additional help in order to clear out the backlog, if we have to call lawyers on the carpet to ensure that they behave in a manner not to frustrate the system, but to discharge rightfully their duties to their client, they should do it.
Yes.
And these are the kinds of things we should talk about. These are the things we should be bringing to the House. And it isn't an issue that we're killjoys. We're not trying to stop the government from celebrating Bahamian exceptionalism and celebrating what we've accomplished and who we are as a people. But it is about prioritizing that in the midst of the 50th anniversary, given the level of crisis on the ground in many of these communities, that we need to reconsider how we're allocating funds and for what reason. Because while we in the plush hotels sipping on some syrup or sipping on whatever, there are some folks who ain't got nothing to eat. And they certainly ain't getting vouchers no more, or they're getting them irregularly. So there's an issue, because there is an issue with priorities. And so, Mr. Deputy, as we support the law reform and revision bill, we also support the government bringing and laying on the table the list of items that have been recommended by the talented team at law reform over these many years, so that we can have a candid, open, honest discussion about what matters we must address. I remember in the financial services sector, successive ministers on both sides used to make the point that one of the things that had put us in good stead as a country is that we would recognize economic opportunities in the financial services sector. We would be quick to market with new financial instruments to attract investments in the Bahamas, and we would get out in front of the competition. And others, those who wish to hold our jurisdiction hostage, will then they will move the goalposts, find some other way to try and curtail our momentum. But at a minimum, we had a self-awareness as a country that we needed to be nimble, we needed to be quick, we needed the right talent to create the right pieces of legislation that made us competitive. That's where we need to be. In almost every sector, we have to find ways through the legislative regime to put us in good stead as a country. And we need to do it in immigration. We need to do it as it relates to fighting crime. We need to do it in tackling this issue of bail. Many times, politicians and police use the judiciary as scapegoats when we don't accept our fair share of the responsibility by not doing what we need to do in here to make life easier for police, for members of the judiciary. And so, Mr. Deputy, I end where I began. There's one rule for the Progressive Liberal Party and its members, and there is a different rule for the rest of us.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many?
On a matter raised by the member from Marco City, and his suggestion that many are not receiving vouchers now or with them irregularity. Fact of the matter, Mr. Deputy, we're trying to get rid of the vouchers. And what is happening is, in the transition, some members and some members of the public, some of our clients, so-called, have not received vouchers or they've been delayed. And that comes on occasions when we are now causing for them to receive their debit cards. And the process sometimes takes longer than we expect to. That's a technology issue from time to time. But we are in no way trying to stop or will prevent any member of the public, particularly the senior members of the community, to be without support. But we have had one or two situations that we are aware of, but I wish to assure the member from Marco City that we are ensuring that all members of the public and the clients receive their debit cards. That's what we're working on now to ensure.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
I'd just like to mention to the Minister, thank you very much for sharing that information. One of the challenges we are having with the debit card is persons who are at counters with the counter filled with grocery to submit a card only to be told there's nothing on it and they're turned away. So that is it is a significant problem that is reoccurring.
The member is
Honourable
correct.
Member.
We have had one or two issues of that as well, Mr. Deputy. And the truth is, it is a technology issue that's created a problem for us from time to time. But we are in discussions and we're seeking to eliminate all of that because we want to get it to the point of near perfection as best we could to ensure that everyone can walk with the dignity that they have and should have and they're able to obtain what they want. But we know of, and you are correct, we're not saying that didn't happen, there are members who have gone to supermarkets to be told that there's nothing on the card. And to that, we have apologized, but the truth is we're seeking to get to near perfection as possible.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is truly good to be back home. As I always do when I rise in this place, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do so with the forbearance of God who wakes us all up and decide what state we will be in, and with gratitude to the people of Freetown. This afternoon, Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I address the matters of this debate, with a heavy heart, I extend condolences to the family of the late Valentino Johnson. Mr. Valentino Johnson was killed in a police-involved shooting on the 16th of April, Sunday of this year, Sunday past. He was a community man, and I speak not of anything to do with the actual matter, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But Mr. Brown was a community-minded man. He was somebody who had a heart for the people. He was somebody who actually assisted us in a breakfast program that we do at Uriah McPhee. He will be missed by his mother, Nera Johnson, and his sister, Anna K. Pinder. He'll be missed by the Camp Road and Lion Road family. He'll be missed by the members and workers at the Freetown constituency office. And I can say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will personally miss him. He was somebody who one could count on to be ever present and ever willing to work. And may his soul rest in peace. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've been asked to wrap up the debate for the member for Centerville. And, you know, having had a little time off, having traveled to the symposium along with the member for Angliston and the Prime Minister in Trinidad, I was in a fairly tranquil mood. I was in a very tranquil mood. It was so nice, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that my only complaint was that you couldn't get hot food in Trinidad. Everything was lukewarm. No vegan food. But then, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, this afternoon, I was told that us on this side are tribalistic, with the implication being that those on the other side are not. And that troubled me because the person who said it is a man of letters. And so he knows that words are important. And tribalism is defined as this: the state or fact of being organized in tribe or tribes. So by definition, when the member for Marco City breaks up his comment in categorizing us and them, he is embarking on tribalism. And it is ironic that he then says that's something that's pejorative. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've learned a lot in 18 months. Now, and I intend to be as exact and relevant as the other side was, and try to be a little more, because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are some serious times, as Jacques Yor says. And it's not just serious in the Bahamas. And a symposium that Angliston, the Prime Minister, and I went to discloses just how serious it is the world over. And it is too serious for us to just be concerned about words. And it's too serious for us only to be concerned with saying what people want to hear and talking. We have to do things. And so when Long Island says there's no police car in North Long Island, that is so. And we've been doing something to address it in the 100 patrol vehicles that we've had to acquire. When we hear, what are you doing to protect women, and the commissioner of police are appointed by this administration, one of the first things out of the gate is to create a sole dedicated unit to do just that. It's not talking about it, it's acting on it. Now, I want to just say this in the nicest way as I possibly can, Mr. Deputy Speaker. When I say nice as possible, when we look at how we act for the Bahamian people, it is important that we do not take them for light. Bahamian people, from the humblest to the highest, are very intelligent. All you need to do is travel the world to understand that. So it behooves the other side to think that these persons do not understand the value of traveling to find out what is happening over the world, to get in people's face, to ask for things. Our Prime Minister got in the face of the Americans, and behold, the Secretary of the Navy came here to tell us how the Navy and the Marine Corps are making their bases, their ships, their operation more environmentally conscious and sensitive so they don't drown us. And so Bahamian people are sufficiently sensible to know who is talking and who is acting. And by acting, I mean doing things. You know, the member for Kalani, before he left, when he was on his feet, spoke about something, and something I find amazing about those opposite. They assert things that they have no possible way of knowing, which is very dangerous. Marco City asserted something about the Law Reform Commission, suggesting that they have created a report and submitted to ministers for the last couple decades, and nobody's bothered to lay it in Parliament. It's dangerous to suggest that they have created a report if you haven't seen it. It is dangerous for Kalani to say that after another Prime Minister opined that Bahamian judges and magistrates must be living on Mars, that all of us as Bahamians sat and smiled and said, go ahead and deride judges. Well, for everyone's edification, Mr. Deputy Speaker, at the symposium, Justice Jacob Witt of the Caribbean Court of Justice, this is ascribed to him. He spoke about just what Prime Minister Gonzalez has said. And he went much further, and I think this bears consideration because it leads into the Law Reform and Revision Bill. And he's reported in the Trinidadian Daily, the Newsday, under a byline of Sean Douglas. The headline is CCJ Judge, Criminal Justice System Needs Complete Overhaul. And I would share this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I would have to print it to lay it, because I adopt this is what he said as a matter of fact at the symposium. It's accurately reported. He says, the Caribbean Court of Justice Judge, Justice Jacob Witt, said on Tuesday that rape victims should not be made to wait 14 years for justice. as he urged a complete overhaul of the criminal justice system. Witt was offering a judicial perspective at the CARICOM Crime Summit at the Hyatt Regency, Port of Spain. He began by denying charges leveled by regional prime ministers on Monday. He denied all of them by Motley and by Gonzalez, that certain judges seem to live on the planet Mars based on their judgment. As he retorted, the highest appellate judges of some Caribbean countries live in the UK. Witt said the CCJ will protect people's human rights despite critics arguing it would not. He said a British academic visiting Guyana this week said people's rights were better protected at the CCJ than at the Privy Council. Witt said constitutions of many countries in the region, excluding Trinidad and Tobago, mandated the trials must be fair for all parties concerned. The trials should be fair for all, defendant, victims, witnesses, and society as a whole. The case shall be afforded a fair hearing and not only the victim. Witt considered the injustice to a young rape victim awaiting justice for years. There are many stories. There are sexual offenses where a girl of 16 is raped. Then it takes 16 or 14 years before the case is tried. What kind of justice is that? In that period, the girl would have grown into a 30-plus-year-old woman and moved on with her life. Now she is married. She may have children. She may have never told her husband about what happened to her when she was 16. And now you have to appear before the court and tell it all over again. So it is no wonder that witnesses are not happy to do that. That means evidence evaporates, and therefore a guilty person might be free. Witt also lamented the plight of witnesses summoned to court. They come, they wait for hours, they are sent back, come again next month, etc., etc. That is not fair to the witnesses. Witt said trials must be fair to society. Take TT. Unfortunately, there's a low detection rate. Of all these murders, it is lower than 20%. Now, if I may stick a pin there, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for all of the talk about what is happening on crime, the detection rate in Trinidad and Tobago is 20% compared to 70+% in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So let us not try to fool the Bahamian people. Further, out of those few detected murders, there was an acquittal rate of 60 to 70%, equating to a conviction rate as low as 30%. This is not the way to run a criminal justice system. He said this system must be fair, be seen to be fair, and protect the rights of all. The system needed, quote, a thorough overhaul, not a piecemeal one. And I'll come back to that when we look at how law reform is designed to work. Witt also lamented the case of a murder accused awaiting trial in jail for 10 years. He said in the past, bail was not given for murder because these cases came to court quickly. But now this is no longer the case. The award of bail comes amid lengthy delays in trials for people deemed innocent until proven guilty. He quoted Chief Justice Ivor Ritchie as saying recently, the whole system was in crisis. Witt recalled the CJ saying 575 persons were awaiting trial for murder in Trinidad and Tobago. And even if 10 judges, which happens to be the amount we have set in the criminal division in this country, tried only murder cases for the next 10 years, such efforts would not clear the backlog in 5 years. He made 3 suggestions to improve the criminal justice system: a better pretrial sifting out of cases where prosecutions was likely to fail for insufficient evidence, more use of plea bargaining, and more use of judge-alone trials. Witt said the CCJ Academy will host a conference on criminal justice reform in Barbados. Sadly, not in the Bahamas. So if we want to participate, somebody will have to travel in October with a wide range of participants to offer proactive thoughts towards a critical look at the system. I read that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because we must be very clear about what we are to do in this place. In this place, we are to make laws for the order and good governance of this country. And that is our duty here, primarily. We are not here to come in depending on what is in the news and talk, talk, talk. So it is convenient to say when it is one of them, and I suspect they may mean a member who spoke this afternoon and a former member of Parliament. He is suggesting the wheels of justice turn quickly, but when it is one of ours, it doesn't. The Bahamian public recall quite well that there are many questionable instances of what has happened to money under their watch. But nobody has been swept up, dragged in, had a Minister of National Security take a witness to the police, direct anything, and to this day, certain members next door, across the way, are bragging that people better not come for them or they'll come out like a raging tiger or some such thing. A gorilla, sorry. Wrong element. So, the Bahamian people are not unintelligent, and it behooves you to try to treat them as such. To talk about a special rule for PLP friends and families, when I know my colleagues aren't going to want me to say this, Mr. Speaker, but plenty PLPs cussing all of us daily, every day of the week, for preferring persons from the opposite side over them. And it is well known, because FNM trolls comment on it and irk it on social media. If the member for Marco City isn't aware of that, I would ask him to potentially check the Black Ops team they have around, telling PLPs how all the FNMs got this when the FNM was in power, and now that we're in power, PLPs aren't getting anything, and which FNM is still in a job and all of that. The Bahamian people are not foolish. Do not treat them as if they are. It is, I'll send you some screen names. You probably know who they are. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need to cut through this. Don't accuse us of being tribalistic if what you then proceed to do is rank tribalism. The reason that we say, when you were in the chair, did you do that, is not to abdicate our responsibility. A good example of it is right this afternoon. Long Island said he was waiting 4 years for something. We have not been in the chair for 2 years yet. So he was waiting about 3¼ years when his government was in power. Now, one of two things is true, and this is how my Grammy and Grandpa used to teach me, right? We from Ragged Island, Marco City, you know how we go. They point out what could be the case. So they could say, either they don't like you, so they ain't doing nothing for you for 3¼ years. So Long Island must consider if the FNM didn't like them for 3¼ years and made them wait for 3¼ years, or there is some legitimate reason that it's taking the time. So when we keep hearing this, oh, don't tell us we didn't do it, That's because we say that that's the ragged island in me anyway when I do it. Because I am saying either y'all didn't do it because y'all didn't like the people, or there is some legitimate reason it takes time. And that's all there is, but then we fix it. All those people y'all convicted for COVID offenses, we fix that immediately. The deficit in manpower for the police, we fixed it. The intervention programs, we fixed it. And in fact, we went further. Angliston could tell you, we have now programs with Angliston, with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Services, the Armed Forces, none of whom actually report to any ministry in this government. I know y'all used to make them report to ministry in y'all's government, but that is and was wrong, and we have stopped it. The commissioner doesn't report to me, the Commodore doesn't report to me, nor does the Commissioner of Corrections. We know that in the previous administrations, y'all's view is that y'all control these people. My view, reading the Constitution and the laws, is that we don't, so we don't. So, to be quite clear, and I'm happy somebody who can't be heard reminded me, the courts have said they're not to report the ministries. And so when you keep coming here, ignoring that we all agreed in 2016 a plan that we would execute, that we are in fact executing it. Witness in Trinidad, Dr. David Allen. I see the Prime Minister, now you make that man travel too, because he don't live in Trinidad. He went down to Trinidad to explain the family concept to address crime, which is getting people to address shame that causes issues. Such was the impact of his presentation that he's already been invited to at least one other Caribbean country so that we may all collaborate to address this issue called crime in this region. Unfortunately, he had to travel. Sorry about that, he stayed in the hotel. I don't know if he sipped any honey, syrup, sorry, but he had to travel, and bearing in mind the type of man he is, I'm quite sure that he will travel to our Caribbean neighbor to seek to assist them, because that is what you do when you try to work together to see what works, what doesn't work, and to craft a common path forward. So Justice Jacob Witt, in his contribution, says a complete overhaul. How is that relevant to what we are discussing? That is relevant because that is what law reform is all about. East Grand Bahamas suggested that, I'm told that we should go further and have a parliamentary draftsman attached to the House of Assembly. That's correct. That's another step. The first step, though, is formulating the legislation that a parliamentary draftsman would give advice to the House about. So that's step 2. We're now at being very clear about step 1. And I must say, with all due deference to St. Anne's, Long Island, and the other side, I do not agree that there's nothing new about this bill. That is true in this sense. When you record information, you could write it with a pen. You could type it on a typewriter. You could type it in a computer. You could type it in a smartphone. All of those accomplish the exact same result. you have memorialized what you chose to write down. But to suggest that writing it with a pen, typing it with a typewriter, typing it with a computer, and dictating it to your phone that types it is all the same thing would, I think, be oversimplifying the matter. There are advances made, and I'm happy that you all aren't opposing this. So you accept that they must be made, but you just say law reform and revision bill, but not now. That's a, from, you say, how to well,
You didn't say it was about time.
yeah, the Trinidad time and Bahamian time is the same time. Let me say this, because I'll put it exactly as it was put to me. To say that I was not here, you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy, point of order, please.
Go ahead.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, no one on this side indicated that not now. We've all said that we support this bill. We just want that to stay on the record. So whatever linguistic gymnastics he does next, he should not misquote us. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm sufficiently chastened by somebody who can honestly say that I wasn't here, so I can't speak of personal knowledge. And I would just trust that in future they take the same position, that when they're not there to witness something, that they don't speak about it as if they were. I'm sufficiently chastened, and I will restrict myself to what I heard Marco City say, which is when you say there's many more things we could have been talking about at this moment instead of this, I take that to mean you could deal with this after you deal with all these other things. And that's how I take it. If he didn't mean it like that, he probably didn't intend.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, I said explicitly, sorry, to borrow from your profession, to be pellucidly clear. Okay? The point was made that we could work on parallel tracks simultaneously, addressing this and the more weighty issues. So just to make that clear for you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm quite sure that the member for West End and Bimini has heard that the side opposite is suggesting that we can debate 3 and 4 bills on the same day, at the same time, and the record will show that, and we hope that they will not object when we seek to do that very shortly.
There you go. Thank you.
So I thank Marco City for disabusing us of this view that we could only debate one thing at one time. Because we were certainly under the impression that they wouldn't agree for us to debate 3 and 4 unrelated things at the same time. But you know, that's, as Anderson says, that's water under the bridge. The record shows exactly what Marco City meant. To speak to the bill itself, because I don't want to be very long at this, to consider the issues raised. The opposite side raised concern about taking power away from the Governor General. I would ask them to consider what power the Governor General has. Because the Bahamian people have access to the Constitution of the Bahamas free online and can go to section 79, subsection 1, Article 79, subarticle 1 of the Constitution that says, the Governor General shall mandatorily, in exercise of his functions, act in accordance with the advice of the Cabinet or a minister acting under the general authority of the Cabinet, except in cases where this Constitution or any other law, he is required to act in accordance with the recommendation or advice of, or with the concurrence of, or after consultation with any person or authority other than the cabinet, provided that the Governor General shall act in accordance with his own deliberate judgment in the performance of the following functions. And it lists them from paragraph A to paragraph H, and matters like this aren't included at all. So the Governor General, under the current act, shall act accordance with the advice of the cabinet. The only difference between this act, this bill, and the act is that there is a specific minister now being designated as opposed to the cabinet. Nobody is taking any power of the Governor General to act in accordance with his deliberate judgment away from him. So the reality is, when Long Island was concerned about replacing the Governor General, it really came from a place of ignorance of the effect of Article 79. And I don't mean anything pejorative by describing it as that. It's just that if you were aware of Article 79, you could not say that anybody was taking anything away from the Governor General. So the Bahamian people ought not to be concerned about that. The other aspect of it, of course, is that there was concern that the time limit for appointments was reduced from not a period not exceeding 5 years to a period not exceeding 3 years. I would advise and submit, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that that is immaterial because the actual provision of the bill, Section 5.3, says that a person who ceases to be a commissioner shall be eligible for reappointment. And you could be reappointed 10 times, but told that 30 years if you are still fit to do it. There is no limitation on the number of appointments you can have, as there are with some appointments. The last matter I'd wish to address, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is it was suggested by Long Island that he was disturbed that under the current act, you have to be exact, a lawyer. You have to be having held or holding or having held judicial office, experience as a legal practitioner, or a teacher of law in a university. You have to be a lawyer to be a law reform commissioner. Well, you know, legal myopia is not a good thing. The act, the bill in terms basically says you have special qualification, training, or experience suitable for your appointment to the commission. The job of the commission is very wide-reaching and varied. And it is to talk about codification of the law, eliminating anomalies, repeal of obsolete and unnecessary enactments, and talking about advising of schemes of law that is necessary. I don't think as a lawyer, and as somebody says, even an eminent lawyer, I think I know everything. For real. There's plenty things I don't know.
We rely on experts.
Plenty things I don't know, Marco City. My children teach me things every day.
You still take credit because you say that's my offspring. That's why they so brilliant.
Of course. My mommy teach me to say that. But at the end of the day, this narrowing everything to be discharged by lawyers is something that the public deprecates. The public deprecates only having lawyers on the disciplinary tribunal for lawyers. And so on the disciplinary tribunals of lawyers, you have a mandatory civilian. You have a mandatory civilian. People are calling for civilian oversight of the police, and they have it. And if we are to have a major oversight or overview, for instance, of law related to cybersecurity, artificial property, artificial human beings, one would hope that somebody with that specific expertise is on the commission, and if that person is not legally qualified, that wouldn't stop them going on the commission. We recognize that while lawyers play an important role, we aren't the end-all and be-all. I'll give you an example, because in Trinidad, Chief Superintendent Thompson paid me a compliment to say that when I did cases, I was always prepared in scientific matters. But it's not that I'm a brilliant scientist. I read what is necessary, and if I have any doubts, a part of my team is a scientist. When we do a case of medical negligence, a part of the team is a doctor. The difficulty that East Grand Bahama has, and you know, my brother, you're a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer who's been a lawyer far longer than you, but I'm not so stuck on being a lawyer. I have no problems. I have absolutely no problems if we're reviewing the law of medical ethics, for instance, with regard eugenics, with regard anything else, that the committee be chaired by somebody other than a lawyer. Now, on this side, what we are saying to the general Bahamian public is when we look at laws, complex laws, touching anything, we accept that people other than lawyers have a part to play. For instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this place is about making laws. Is anyone suggesting that you have to be a lawyer to be a member of parliament? When the only job of this chamber is to make laws. You know, Marco City, you know, we should go there and then.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Member for Freetown for. It is not that I, as the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, has any particular reference to me being an attorney. So I'm not looking at it through those eyes. And the way how I referenced it in my presentation was that other jurisdictions, and I read off the names of the other jurisdictions, they spoke to this as a requirement. And they were in recent times. Some were in 2019, some were in 2020. Take it easy, Yamakra. Let me just articulate what I'm doing. Let me. I'm not walking anything back. And if you would just listen, then you could. If you would just listen, then. Mr. Deputy.
Order, members.
The point I was making was, I'm not saying this through a personal situation with me being an attorney. But what I am saying is, and I referenced this in my presentation, that there were other jurisdictions that I pointed to, in the UK, in Hong Kong, in Barbados, in Mauritius, where they gave specific requirements, not just from being a lawyer, but they gave specific requirements of being a lawyer, also being a retired judge, and also being a law professor. So they were specific in that for the law commission, that there was a requirement for lawyers. So my question was that I didn't understand your need to take that out. And I honestly still do not understand your need to take that out. So that's the point I was making. It's not anything that's personal to me, but it is in other jurisdictions, this is the way it is articulated.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I know East Grand Bahama and I were both educated in the UK, and so he would be well aware of this. To seek to equate yourself with a system that is not similar to you in very many ways is not making it fit for purpose. In the reality of it, Barbados, down at the symposium, is coming to the conclusion that they have to move away from how the English do their committals to the Supreme Court, and now they're going to be seeking to do it how we do it. So we are bold enough, and this Prime Minister is bold enough to say, just because you're colonial doesn't mean you're right. We're on the road to 50, for heaven's sakes. For me to say I'm going to do it because the English do it, who still haven't really apologized or paid reparations for slavery, how the Australians do it, who were a penal colony of England. At the end of the day, East Grand Bahama knows full well that when we go to them for their final court of appeal, they apply the laws that we choose to make. And so we as Bahamians have to decide what we want to do. And the Bahamian people simply need to decide whether, when the Law Commission is looking at drafting laws, whether they want all lawyers there, or maybe they want somebody who may look like them. It's simple. We have decided, but in this bill, that we're not going to make it the ultimate province of lawyers. Now, for me to be championing that, and I may get fired, that you all say we get fired every 5 years, right? I may be reducing a job that I could go and get. But at the other day, at the end of the day, the reality of it is that the choice is between whether you wanted all lawyers, and to Marco City's mumble point, if you say we just want to benefit one of ours, you have a bunch of people who, you have a bunch of PLP lawyers who still cussing us. So at the end of the day, the question fundamentally is this, and Marco City should understand it's a matter of principle, because the crass point that is seeking to be made is really insulting. And I'm really nice. I still have a bit of the Caribbean in me. I'm really nice. Because usually, if you say those things about me, I wouldn't be nice to you. Because you're suggesting I'm corrupt. And anybody who suggests that I'm corrupt, they know what they could go and do with themselves. But at the end of the day, if it is simply giving a job to one of the boys, retaining the requirement of that boy to be a lawyer wouldn't defeat the ability for you to give a job to one of your boys. So let's forget your crass point of saying it's to give somebody a job, because if we kept it as only a lawyer, you could give the lawyer you chose the job. It's a matter of principle. We have decided to involve people other than lawyers in the framing of laws, and that must be a good thing. Nobody should be complaining about that. So we'll see who is appointed, but as a matter of principle on this bill, we have decided in this bill to extend the ability of participation in framing laws for the order and good governance of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on this road to 50 to be inclusive for any Bahamian to be able to appreciate, to be able to participate. For myself, as a lawyer, even as an English-trained lawyer, even as a lawyer who they talk about still wearing long wigs, that is something that I support. The people themselves should be involved in framing their own laws, and if it is an area that we're considering that requires their special skills, there is no reason under the sun that the legal qualification should be necessary for 1 out of 3. So I would say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that Freetown supports this bill and supports it expressly in the terms in which it is drawn. And for all that has been said about why aren't we doing more, it really amounts to why aren't we coming in here talking back and forth across these aisles more. We're certainly concerned with doing more. We look anxiously to serious reform and to the question of why aren't parliamentarians listed in Section 6, subsection 2. Parliamentarians themselves get a job hired and giving recommendations. As we get to the committee stage, parliamentarians have a position greater than the Attorney General, unless he's in this place, greater than the public official, greater than the holder of judicial office, greater than attorneys at law, greater than members of the general public. Parliamentarians have the ability to come here and move amendments to accomplish what they want to see accomplished. Parliamentarians, under the rules of this House, have the ability to bring private members' bills. So parliamentarians have a right that need not be narrowed by including them in the Section 6.2 persons for consultation. Whether you're consulted or not, once the bill comes to this place, you have the ability to say what you want to say and frame it to get it moved, something a member of the public cannot do, something all of the other people listed in Section 6.2 cannot do. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with that, Freetown supports the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law, Reform, and Revision Act, and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas, and for the connected purposes. Order that the bill be read a second time. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law, Reform, and Revision Act, and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Further second reading of bills. Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Deputy, I now move that the House resolves itself into the Committee of the Whole with the member from Mount Moriah.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House do resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole with the member of Mount Moriah in the chair. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House will now resolve itself into the committee stage.
I just wanted to make sure.
The Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that the long title of the Law Reform and Revision Bill 2022 be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who are opposed will stand. The long title is agreed.
Mr. Deputy, I now move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Deputy, I just move an amendment. The amendment, the terms of the amendment is to delete the current clause 1 short title and to substitute a new clause 1 rubric short title and commencement. Sub clause 1, this act may be cited as the Law Reform and Revision Act 2023. And sub clause 2, this act shall come into force on the first day of May 2023.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 1B be amended as read. As many? In favor? Remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Clause 1, the motion is carried. Clause 1 is amended as read.
Mr. Deputy, I now move that parts 2 through part 4 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved.
Second.
It is, sorry.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, in
Chairman.
the moving of parts 2 to 4 being moved for approval, I'd wish to move 2 amendments. Both are in part 2. The first is to clause 3.
You have it. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
the first is to clause 3. No. Sinans, that's clause 1, then there are 2 others.
Look underneath it.
137. The second, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the clause 3. After the words commission, after the words 3 persons appointed in line 2, insertion of the words immediately after as commissioners.
It has been, is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 3, that the bill be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Clause 3 of the bill is amended as agreed. The motion is carried.
The second amendment in part 2, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is of clause 7. Immediately after the word reform on the first line, the insertion of the word and revision.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that Clause 7 of the bill be amended as read. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Clause 7 of the bill is agreed, amended as read.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The bill in its entirety has been agreed as amended. The motion is carried.
No, you.
Okay, midwife. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022, long title, be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Part 1 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that Part 1 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Part 1 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Part 2 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? Okay. It has been moved and seconded that Part 2 of the bill be. Chairman. Chairman.
No, there is. It's actually in Part 1. It's Part 1, number 2. And we'll now move for the amendment.
Thank you so much. Yes. Mr. Chair, I move that 1, delete the word bachelor in the definition of postgraduate specialty study nurse, and 2, delete the word postgraduate in the definition of postgraduate specialty nurse and substitute the word graduate.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the bill be amended, to be agreed as amended. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The clause is agreed as amended. The motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, I now move that Parts 2 to Part 9 of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? Right. It has been moved and seconded that Part 2 of the bill, Part 2 through 9 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion, as many, my apologies.
Yes.
My apologies.
Mr. Chair, I move that in Section 68, delete the clause 68 and delete the clause 69.
Right.
Mr. Chair, can we have an explanation for the reason for deleting those two clauses?
Turn it
please?
differently. During the actual debate, Clause 68 was brought to our attention by the member for Central Grand Bahama, and 69 was brought to our attention by the member for Kalani. We went to the Nurses Council, and they have agreed that they are satisfied that those two clauses could be removed.
They were repetitive.
They were repetitive, and they were reflective in the old legislation that was not necessary to take over into this piece of legislation.
Thank you. But we do take those to your side. Made the recommendation. That's Section 9.
It has been moved and seconded that Section 9 is agreed as amended. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Clause 9 is agreed as amended.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the first, second, and third schedules of the bill be agreed.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that clauses
First, second, and third.
1, 2, and 3 be agreed. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. Schedule 1, 2, and 3 is agreed.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the nurses and midwives bill in its entirety be agreed.
Is there a second? Seconder. Mhm. It has been moved and seconded that that the bill be agreed in its entirety, as amended. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The bill in its entirety is agreed, as amended. The motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, I now move that the Speaker or the Deputy Speaker do now take the chair.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Deputy Speaker do now take the chair. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The Deputy Speaker will now take the chair. Yeah. All right, thank you. So I need to say something there. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg leave to report that the committee has examined the bill, having made amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the chairman of Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bill, made no amendments thereto. Third reading and having made amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Mr. Deputy, I now move for the third reading and passing of the Law Reform and Revision Bill 2022.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law, Reform and Revision Act and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a third time and pass.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Law, Reform and Revision Act and to modernize the law for reforming, revising, and consolidating the laws of the Bahamas and for connected purposes.
Order that the bill to now pass and the title therefore declared to be a bill for an act.
No, the Law, Reform and Revision Act 2023.
The Law, Reform and Revision Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
Mr. Deputy, I now move for the third reading and passing of the Nurses and Midwives Bill 2022.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. A bill for an act to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery, to continue the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for the training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurse, to provide for the training, regulation, enrollment, and licensing of licensed practical nurses, to provide for the regulation of nurse interns, to provide for the regulations of unlicensed assistive personnel, to provide for the regulation, registration, and licensing of nursing agencies, to repeal the Nurses and Midwives Act 1971, and for the connected purposes. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a third time and pass.
A bill for an act to expand the practice of nursing and midwifery, to continue the Nursing Council of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to provide for the training, regulation, registration, and licensing of registered nurses, midwives, and advanced practice nurses, to provide for the training, regulation, enrollment, and licensing of licensed practical nurses, to provide for the regulation of nurse interns, to provide for the regulation of unlicensed assistive personnel, to provide for the regulation, registration, and licensing of nursing agencies, to repeal the Nurses and Midwives Act 1971 and for connected purposes.
Order that this bill do now pass, and the title therefore declared to be Nurses and Midwives Act 2023. For the third reading of bills.
No further third reading of bills, Mr. Deputy, but I wish to thank the member from Mount Moriah for serving as the chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. Member statements. The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Want to just update my constituents. The constituency office has been in touch with water and sewage. 2 water and sewage holes that were dug, poorly filled, and not paved in the area of Brigadoon and in the area of New Moon along Eastern Road. Those were supposed to be receiving attention today. There is a remaining hole dug by BPL, reported by Nassau East North, on the main road entering in by a very important property. If we could have someone from BPL go down, all of the constituents that live in that area are complaining about the severity of it. I'll get that information to the minister, the member from Fort Charlotte, one of the many good constituents of St. Anne's.
Thank you, honorable member. Appointment of select committees. Instructions of select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices of future meetings.
Mr. Deputy, I'd like to redo the notices in the name of the government.
Thank you, honorable member. Adjournment.
We renew all notices in the name of the opposition. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was still thinking of my constituent.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
On the adjournment, Mr. Deputy, I now move that the House adjourns to Monday, April 24th, 2023 at 10 a.m.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the House and its arising do adjourn to the 24th of April at 10 a.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Final adjournment.
Mr. Deputy, I move that the House now stands adjourned to Monday, April 24th, 2023 at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the House do now adjourn. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The House stands adjourned to the 24th of April at 10 a.m. 2023.